Marcie, and I am here with David today, and we're just going to talk a little bit about, we between email and telephone calls, we get thousands of calls a week, and so we're going to take the top 10 questions, 10 or so questions that usually comes in, and try and answer those for you guys. But before we do that, I would like to introduce, as I just did, David. Can you tell us just a little bit about yourself, like how you found us and your journey to here?
Yeah, sure. Hi guys, I'm David. I was born and raised in the Midwest, and pretty normal childhood, I guess. And then in my early 20s, I started looking into other things, and kind of, I guess, because I'm a truth seeker, started seeing that maybe not everything is how we think they are. Anyway, that's how I got into kind of natural health and looking beyond the medical system and drugs and surgery and that whole thing. And I guess basically how I got here, how I wound up in the office was, long story short, a couple years ago, I decided to do like a 10-day smoothie cleanse with one of my friends. And throughout that time, I started watching some videos and got into like the whole raw food things, Dan McDonald and some other things, and he mentioned Dr. Morse a lot. So I started watching Dr. Morse's videos, and I had seen him before but had never watched a full video because they were so long. I was like, not 2 hours, And then I finally did, and I was hooked. Just everything really resonated with me. And what I liked the most is that he made everything really simple. There's so many complexities and minute details. So for someone to be able to articulate things in a very simplistic way really resonated with me, and he brought in the spiritual side, which I really resonated with as well. So basically I just started watching the videos, started getting into the whole raw food diet, and that was a couple years ago. So I had a lot of ups and downs throughout that time, and eventually decided I wanted to take the class, so I came and did level 1 and level 2, and knew that I had in the back of my mind that if I could come work at this office, out of all my mentors and people that I wanted to learn from or work from, I'd want to come here. So I just kind of made some moves and put into action to at least have the possibility of that happening. And then end of last summer, I got the call or email that said that they had a position. So I went back to Iowa, and within 3 weeks had everything figured out on how I was going to move here, and I've been here ever since. So it's almost been 6 months. Yeah. And it feels like I just started, so yeah.
Flies, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Flies.
Yeah.
So in a lot of people say, I would love to come work at the office and that kind of thing. What was the biggest surprise in actually getting here and being in the office and working? What was kind of like the biggest thing for you?
Yeah, well, there's probably a couple of things. So one was that, you see the YouTube videos and hear Dr. Morse, and so it just almost seems kind of surreal, that there's this amazing group of people out here and, doing this high level of healing, and then you get here and you realize that everyone's just normal people, and not in a bad way, in an awesome way, just friends, and we can connect, and it's just a normal group of people, and anyone can do this, anyone can learn.
Absolutely.
So that's one thing. And the other thing is probably just the level of like suffering that people are going through. I mean, you hear about it, but then after I start talking to people and doing emails and dozens of phone calls every day with people from all around the world, really, and man, there's some really bad cases, and just people are really suffering.
Yeah. That is the hardest part to watch. Lives being destroyed, and the actual offer of no hope in the allopathic community, other than we can maintain this a little bit, but there's never any, oh yeah, we can cure that, we can reverse that, we can get you worked back out of that. And just, to me, that's an offer of no hope. And there's never an offer of no hope. I don't care what someone has been labeled with, cancer, kidney disease, dialysis, which we're going to talk about today. People can work themselves back out of it.
Yeah. I almost feel like kind of how dare someone just, say, oh, that's it. You have this amount of time to live or something, And then you get the phone call and say, well, they gave me 4 months. And man, it's rough to hear them say it. I can only imagine what it's like for them to go through. And I was just going to say, one of my favorite things so far about working at the office has been, when we get to talk to someone and they really don't have hope, or they just don't, or maybe they're just new to the whole detox and they're so involved in the medical system and allopathic medicine, and then you start explaining things to them, and man, they start connecting the dots in their head, and they're like, oh, that makes sense. Oh, that makes sense. Especially if they haven't seen Dr. Morse's videos, and when you can hear that hope start to come back into their voice, it's like, yeah, those are the phone calls that end up being an hour long.
Yes. Yes.
So.
And that's the thing that a lot of people don't understand. These phone calls aren't just quick, 5-minute, what do I do about this, and do and bang, we're done and on to the next one. I mean, some of these are in depth, and you do take time with them, and you do, pour your heart and your soul and your knowledge and anything that you can give them in that phone call, to them. And so it can be overwhelming. I don't want to say overwhelming. It can be, it can bring joy in the end, but the call in the meantime can be a little overwhelming.
Yeah, especially if they're thinking, you mean all the stuff that the doctor and everyone has been telling me and my family and what I've been learning my whole life isn't the way that it is or that it has to be.
Yeah.
So, it's pretty cool though.
Sometimes ripping tape off the eyes isn't the easiest thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I think we're just going to dig in and get started.
Okay.
Just ask away.
All right. So, I'm lucky enough to be kind of the mediator, or get to kind of question you, the expert here. So, the first thing we're going to go over is diet, which is, a pretty big issue, but I think it's good that we do this first because a lot of the other questions are going to, play into this, because that is really one of the main things. At least I don't know how you would say it, but I say when we work on detoxification, we're using diet primarily and in an herbal protocol,
Correct.
Right? And then obviously lifestyle changes and things. But
right.
So diet is huge. So lots of you guys have probably heard about a species-specific diet and what our optimal diet is. So I guess just in general, how would you explain that to maybe someone that hasn't heard, what we should be eating? Maybe not so specific yet, but just in general.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're given a lot of information out there on nutrition today, and the problem is you read one thing about one thing and you get the negative of it. Mm-hmm. Then you get another article that comes along and tells the positive. Examples, coffee would be one. Everybody all hears the positives of coffee, but then they hear all the negatives of coffee. And where do you find that balance? And when you're looking at us as a species, it's always best, regardless of whether we are a creationist or we believe in evolution, we can all agree that there was a beginning.
Right.
And it's best to go back to what that beginning was like, because people talk about, we've evolved. The problem is, we may be, utilizing different enzymes than we did way back when, and that kind of thing, but evolve doesn't always mean in a better way.
Right.
Because look at our health today. There is a reason why we are getting more and more sick, and more diagnoses, and more drugs, and opioids, and surgeries, and cancer just moved not too long ago from 1 in 3 to 1 in 2 in men, and 1 in 4 to 1 in 3 in women. We are losing the battle for health. And in my book, you have to go back to where that's coming from, and that is our nutrition, number one.
Or lack thereof.
Or lack thereof, exactly. And so when you're looking at how we were created, we weren't created with fangs to rip and tear. We weren't created with talons to do the same. Look at our stomachs. We weren't created with 4 stomachs or 2 stomachs. We were created with 1.
Right.
And all of this equates to plucking things off the trees and picking things off the bushes and maybe even pulling them from the ground and consuming them in very easy for the body to handle.
Right.
We weren't even created with flames and stoves and things there. I mean, we ate raw. And so
there's not really any way to get around that.
Yeah, there's really not. Mm-hmm. And just getting back to the beginning and how we were created is the best way to look at how we are supposed to eat.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, there's well over a dozen anatomical limitations that just point to, like you said, the fingers, the level of acid in our stomach, the length of the digestive tract. There's so many things. I mean, that goes back to the being so in your mind, and yeah, you can look at the chemistry of every single food and try to figure out how our body responds to that. But why not just look at what our physical, anatomical limitations would show that we would eat?
Right.
So,
exactly.
yeah. Awesome. Okay. So let's talk about a little bit like whether the importance between, I guess you could say, toxicity versus nutrition. What's more important? Or, what do you put? Lack of nutrition or lack of elimination? Like, focusing on, should we be worried more about getting the right nutrition and making sure we have all this stuff? Or focusing on the lack of elimination? We're not removing the toxicity.
Yeah. Well, we were designed, our bodies were designed to function and work together like a well-oiled machine. We weren't designed to sit there and think, how many times have I had a bowel movement today? Am I sweating? That kind of thing.
Right.
And we weren't even really designed to worry about, what am I going to make for supper? I mean, literally, we were walking along and there's an apple, I'm hungry, let's eat, So both of those, I don't think we should be worried about. But in our world today, we kind of have to plan for that kind of thing. And with our bodies getting as sick as what they are getting, we have to look at both of that. One is a matter of input, the other is a matter of elimination. It's just like in a car, you're driving down the road, you're on empty, you need to fill up.
Right.
The problem is, if your exhaust is blocked, you've got issues there, and the car's not going to go eventually either.
Right.
So you do kind of have to look at those. As far as nutrition goes, and we're going to get into this a little bit later on, about sugars and proteins and fats and that kind of thing, but your body knows what to do with the basics, the simplicity. It knows what to do. It's a matter of, has it become so toxic because of lack of elimination that it is no longer functioning properly? And so that's the biggest part right there.
So would it be safe to say that you can be putting in all the perfect nutrition, but in a way the elimination or the is more important, because you might be putting in the right fuel, but if it's not being able to be utilized, and we are going to talk about that more, that maybe the toxicity needs to be addressed first.
Well, let's look at this picture. I can bring in all the groceries into my kitchen that I want. I can fix that food and I can consume it. I can throw it in a trash bag and throw it in the corner. Eventually, if I'm not eliminating that and getting it out of the kitchen, it's going to continue to build. Pretty soon you're going to start smelling it. You're going to start seeing it. You're going to start, it's going to affect you.
Then the critters come
Exactly.
to help
Exactly.
out. Yeah.
So, in essence, you can bring all the good stuff, even the apple cores and all the good things. But if you're not eliminating that trash the way that you're supposed to, you're going to get sick. Even though all of this was good,
Right.
you're going to get sick if you do not get rid of and eliminate. Pretty soon that bacteria is going to start affecting you. The mold, the fungus, the smells, the maggots, you name it. It's all going to start. It's the same way within the body. That's why we have, it's about balance. It's the over issues that we deal with. We need some acid in the body, but it's being over acidic that's
Right.
the issue.
Yeah.
We need some mucus in the body, but it's the overproduction of mucus that's a problem. Same with parasites. There are, believe it or not, parasites that are good for us within the body.
Yeah.
It's the bad ones because of the environment that are allowed to come and stay that are the issue.
Right.
And it's time we start evicting some of these.
Yeah.
A lot of these.
Yeah. But then it goes back to, like, you can't just, like, with the garbage in the corner, what good would it be is, oh, the maggots and the animals are coming. If you're just focusing on killing all the, rats or whatever comes in, that's not fixing the
Right,
issue.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. You can't just evict the critters and leave the trash there.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
They'll always find a way in.
So, did we talk about, okay, so fruits, obviously. So for fruits and vegetables is kind of what we come down to, right? When we talk about looking at our anatomical limitations or what we would be doing in nature.
Before we move on, there's just one thing that I really want to address, and that's the subject of malabsorption,
Okay.
malnutrition. A lot of people are walking around in our world today, don't even realize that they are malabsorbed. And you can have a young girl that's in shape, but all she eats is Ho-Hos and Twinkies and that kind of thing. You can have a man who is overweight and the tummy is hanging over, and nobody would think, oh, he's malabsorbed.
Yeah.
But yet that is the case that's going on. You look at all these third world countries where they've got the little babies that have got the bloated tummies and the really, really skinny legs, and then you start comparing a lot of that with some of the people that walk around in our world today, here in the United States. They've got the skinny legs and the really big tummies and stuff. And that equates to malabsorption. And so the biggest aspect of that is the way we are eating is promoting malabsorption in our country, which is causing a lot of our issues as well.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So kind of the question is, can we survive or can we thrive on just fruit? Because obviously fruits and vegetables is kind of, our focus, and primarily the fruit when it comes to detoxification and the astringent properties and all that. But I get a lot of people that ask, well, can I really survive on just fruit? And, a lot of questions I get is, optimally maybe we can if it was optimal fruit, but right now, can we survive on just fruit? And should that be a goal? And obviously I think it's safe to say that you can do very well on just fruit for a period of time, for cleansing, for detoxing. It's probably one of the best things to do. But what's your take on, thriving or surviving on a fruitarian only diet?
So this is what I like to share with people. My job, when someone comes to me, our job here at the clinic is not to tell people how they should eat for the rest of their lives.
Okay.
We are talking about a detox state. We are talking about using foods as tools. Just like you would, you build a house, you have a toolbox with a lot of different things in it. And specifically, you use a hammer to hammer a nail. You use a screwdriver to screw in. That kind of thing. You use a miter saw to cut corners. I mean, there's for trim. There's just different things that you use. And when you're detoxing, you're very limited on the nutritional aspect of foods that detox. I'm sorry, you can try and do a bread detox. It's just not going to work. The last time I heard of anybody that did a McDonald's detox, it didn't bode very well for him.
It didn't go over too well.
So we use fruits and vegetables in a detox. The word detox simply means cleaning. It means cleaning, it means healing, it means resting. That's what it means. And so we're using food as a tool, just like I would use mopping stuff to mop the floor. I might use an apple to work with my gallbladder. I might use the grapes to do a whole body fast and try and eliminate tumors. I might use, kiwi for the pancreas and that kind of thing. Pomegranates are excellent. And I know we talk about the acidity of stuff, but pomegranates are excellent for thyroid nodules. And so, you can use some of this stuff specifically. Your ankles are swollen. Go get yourself some nettle tea. Go get yourself some parsley and use that. It's tools that we're using.
Right.
When it comes to outside of detox and outside of what we do in a fruitarian only world, can I say that it can't be done? I'm not going to say that, because I believe that it can, and I believe that's how we started out. But fast forward in our world today, with all the stress, with all the emotional issues, with all the junk that just goes on politically and environmentally and things like that, fruit takes you on a journey and brings you higher.
Yeah.
And if you've got a lot of trapped emotions and a lot of trauma and a lot of junk going on and stress, you're going to have a hard time handling that fruitarian lifestyle.
Yeah.
Because it's going to try and bring you up. It's kind of like vibrations, the beta and the theta waves in the brain. You can actually, it's called brain entrainment. And if you have somebody that's an alcoholic, the reason that they got that way, I'm talking from a chemical. I'm not talking spiritual and emotional here. I'm talking from a chemical aspect, is when they started drinking that alcohol and continually getting drunk, those waves started increasing in vibration higher and higher. So now when they start coming down from the alcohol, it doesn't feel right, because they're not acting up here, they're starting to come down here. And that's where you see that withdrawal symptom come, the shakes and the things like that come into play. And you can actually go in and retrain the brain to re-recognize those lower waves that we're supposed to act at and help them come out of that alcoholism. Well, it's the same in reverse kind of for fruit. Your fruit, and not in the different ways, but the fruit actually takes your vibrational level up. It opens you don't have that confusion, the brain fog, it clarity and things like that. But it starts moving lymph. And trapped within our lymphatic vessels are emotions and trauma and memories.
Absolutely.
So when that lymph starts moving and those traumas and emotions start coming out, we're like, what? I thought I dealt with that 15 years ago.
Right.
And you start going back through some of this stuff, and if you're not prepared for it, that's what we call the emotional detox. It can, time after time after time.
Yeah. And that's such a real thing. Not from talking to people, but just personally, anyone that hasn't done just all fruit for just a period of time, or anyone that has done that knows that
Yes.
you have, a whole different level of physical energy comes, but then, at least I've never been able to do it consistently without going through some major emotional issues.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's hard to figure out and kind of like what's going on, but yeah, you're detoxing the body, but then the emotions come.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that's even harder to
Yeah.
deal with than the physical
Oh,
side.
I've went through it before, where I was just standing at the sink and no reason at all, just started crying, or in the shower and all of a sudden I'm weeping, and different things like that, and your body is letting things out. It's letting things go, which you have to. It's like a toxin or a poison. That has to be removed and eliminated.
And that's one thing that I've realized before, because one thing I've had a lot of experience with is kind of yo-yoing, back and forth, really extreme this way, really extreme the other way. So I've definitely realized that lots of times when I come up against the roadblock of something that needs to be emotionally released, if I don't deal with that, it always ends up in me making bad decisions with diet. It's just, but when I can deal with that and really just sit there, or whether you're using meditation or breath work or prayer or whatever it is, to get through that, then I feel like, you feel lighter and you can continue with the diet. And
Well, in that same vein, you start crying all the time, or feeling. Another one that's big is anger. Just pure anger and rage just starts coming out and will hit you out of the blue, and you're not sure where it came from. But if it's the crying and stuff like that, and then you're down the road like, well, wait a minute, I started this fruit thing and now I'm depressed. this doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so now you're the other way and you're binge eating on things, trying to calm yourself down, and then you're like...
That's just suppressing everything.
Exactly.
You know, it's like sedation.
Exactly.
Yeah. And another thing with what you were saying about the, when you're on the fruit diet and when you're detoxing, just to point it out, because you said, you don't have the mental fog and you get clearer, but there are times when people will start to eat the fruit and, I got on the fruit and right away or after a week of being on the fruit, I started to get the headaches and the brain fog, but that's not because of the fruit. I mean, it's not a side effect of the fruit.
Right.
It's the fruit causing the detoxification and moving those toxins and
it's called a Herxheimer reaction. We call it here a healing crisis. And you got to understand, your fruits have tannins and astringents in them, and they're going to get things moving. They're going to stir things up. And when that happens, fruit does not cause, it exposes. And so it's exposing something that was already there.
Right.
It's not that a lot of people go on fruit and they start having pancreatic pains and double over and pain and things like that. That is not causing pancreatitis.
Right.
That is stirring up the inflammation that's already in there and trying to work it out. Mm-hmm. The whole story of Ashton Kutcher is one of the biggest ones. Mm-hmm. If he would have kept going, things would have calmed down and he would have been like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and who knows if his kidneys were filtering and, all that.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
With Steve Jobs, he was a fruitarian for years. They don't blame... they don't look at the fruit as prolonging his life.
Right.
But when he stopped doing fruit and started going downhill, now they're blaming the fruit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
Yep. Crazy. Okay. I don't know how much more you want to do on diet, but we can talk about greens and veggies.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of people just... the difference between the fruits and the greens and the veggies, what they're good for, obviously the building and the different structures. Basically the pros and cons of your greens, your veggies, and maybe some specific types of veggies or greens that you would suggest.
Okay. Yeah. As far as pros on the veggies, I adore vegetables. I just do. If I have a craving, it's usually for a vegetable. In the evening when I'm having some emotional stuff go on. But they are loaded with nutrition. They are, they're just, they're good for grounding. They're good for nutrition. They've got a lot of good qualities in them. As far as the pros, they do take a little longer to digest. But they're great for building. If you are really, really thin and you have detox to the point where it's like, okay, now I'm going to take a break and I'm going to build for a while, your greens are excellent for that. Very, very good for helping to rebalance some things.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, I lost my train of thought there as to what you were even asking.
Just pros and cons of vegetable matter and maybe specific veggies and different things like that. I was going to ask you, is it kind of safe to say that, in general, your fruits are going to be obviously the highest, like vitamin complexes and different things like that, and that your veggies are going to be the best sources of your minerals?
Very much so.
Yeah. So
you've got a good mix. Every fruit and every vegetable has macro and micronutrients. And so you're going to get, if you're doing fruitarian only and you've got a well-rounded diet of fruits, you're not going to have to worry. If you're just deciding to do vegetables and you do well-rounded, that's the key, the well-rounded, because every fruit and vegetable has a different combination of nutrients in it. And so if I'm having, 6 different vegetables in a day, I'm going to get more of that complete.
Right.
If I'm having 6 to 7 fruits in a day, I'm going to get that. Now, that's not saying that you have to mix those in the same dish.
Yeah.
You can have apples for breakfast and berries for lunch and, that kind of thing.
And even, maybe not even in the same day. Right?
Exactly.
You could mono mono meal or mono day of fruit, and then do a
Exactly.
whole nother fruit the next day, or a whole nother fruit and veggies the next day. You know?
One of the best times that I had with Craig and I was we picked a week, and every day we decided to do something different. And one day was apples, and one day was pears, and one day was watermelon, and things like that. And it was more fun just thinking about that. And then, oh, today's pears, and I love pears, but tomorrow's watermelon.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of thing. And so it was just fun. Make this fun. Make it fun. And in whatever way you can, don't stress it too much.
Yeah. Okay. And just to touch on that, it is important that you get good fruit if you're doing mono diets and things, because you know I probably mentioned this before, but it's not so big. If you're a person who's not used to a lot of fruit or things, and you're just snacking on a fruit, okay, I'll get this. But if you're eating only fruits or only fruits and vegetables, it's important that they are high quality or that they taste good. You know, because I remember used to eating some fruit as snacks, and they're acidic, or the strawberries weren't good, or different things. Now I'm like, I'll travel an hour away or plan all my meals, because I just I care a lot more about it. Because if I'm only eating mangoes for a few days, I want those mangoes to be good.
Absolutely.
If I'm doing some watermelon only days or meals, I want the watermelons to be ripe and seeded and good if possible. So I think that helps you stay on track a little bit. But,
Absolutely.
so I think that's pretty good with diet. Well, I guess we'll do just real quick your thoughts on whole foods, eating the food whole. Because I follow a lot of people on social media and just different things just to kind of see what's out there. And so many opposing and conflicting ideas between eating your fruits whole, blending them, juicing them. This takes out the fiber, but this kills all the nutrients. You're oxidizing things. You have to eat it, better for digestion. There's so many different points of view for all of them. So what's your take on that? Do you think that it's important to not do some and do some other, or you think it's all okay in moderation?
I think it's all okay in moderation. That's my personal opinion. Obviously, whole foods, picking up an apple and eating it versus putting it in a blender and making an applesauce out of it, I don't see much difference unless you're removing the skin. There's a lot of good things in that skin. Juicing, you are removing the fiber. So you're taking down digestion and allowing the energy that would normally take a little longer to be put into cleaning and healing the body.
Right.
Water fasting, you're going even farther. And then dry fasting, to be honest, you're at the top of the mountain, in my opinion. And I do want to talk about fasting a little bit later, because I think that's key. It's very important to this healing journey that people find themselves on, and the differences, and what should I do, how long should I do it, that kind of thing.
Okay.
So I do want to talk about that a little bit later. But
Yeah, awesome. So juicing would be beneficial because there's no fiber to deal with,
juicing would be beneficial,
especially with greens, maybe, and some of the harder to digest greens.
Exactly.
Yep. And then there's might be a little issue with oxidization, and losing some of the nutrients, but it's a give and take thing.
Yeah,
Right?
and that's a time thing as well.
Yeah.
I like to be able to juice it and drink it right away.
Right.
But let's just face it, in our life, in our world today, that's just not always possible. There are things that I sometimes have to fix and prepare and bring to work.
Right.
And that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so just be prepared for that. You can find dark glass, like blue and green containers that you can put things in that not eliminates, but lowers
Yeah.
that from happening, so that you
Right.
can keep those qualities longer.
Yeah.
And just be prepared. Preparation is one of the best things for being on this journey.
Yeah, and definitely the type of juicer, and you can just do your own research. We could really get into juicing, because
Yeah.
I've juiced a lot. I was really into juicing for a long time. So the types of juicers and how well they keep
Yes.
it, and same thing with blenders. And now I'm to the point where I kind of like just eating the whole, because I did so much juicing and so much blending for a while. I do see the benefits of just eating the actual food
Yeah.
too. I feel like it makes you satiated at the right time. It's because it's just naturally how
Right.
you're supposed to eat it. But anyway.
Well, I always think it's funny. There's two things that I always get. Where do you find the time to eat raw? And Well, I'll answer that one first because the other one just left my mind. But that cracks me up because, to be honest with
It's
you, you're right. I walk over to my fruit bowl that I've already washed, and I pick out a couple of apples or oranges or fruit and peel it. Oh, how am I going to plan this one?
Right.
And so, I mean, really, I understand if you're juicing for a while, that can take time.
Yeah.
When you first start on this journey, I would really recommend not to go out and spend thousands of dollars getting stuff until you've done it for a while, talk to people, and know what it is that you want to accomplish, and then find your tools. People talk about how expensive this is and that kind of thing. To be honest with you, I haven't found it that way, in the fact that now when I walk into a market or a grocery store, I literally walk the produce aisle.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
And the juice maybe aisle if am pulling a juice because I didn't have time to do it, so I'm doing an organic already done up juice.
Yeah.
Which is definitely not the best and recommended, but there are times when you do what you got to do.
Right. Yep.
And so I have cut out the aisle for the cereals. I have cut out the aisle for the cookies and the snacks and the cakes and the canned food and the noodles, and I could go on and on and on. I've even cut out the aisle with all the cleaners and stuff that you walk down and can be overloaded with the smells because I'm doing more natural cleaners.
It's so much more simplistic.
Yeah.
It's not, I don't know where it, So.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you don't look at what you're spending in fruit, look at what you're not spending in junk.
And you just mentioned something there about, whether it's buying a juice if you have to or something, and just basically I just wanted to talk about doing the best that you can. Because there's so many questions and calls where it's like spending a lot of time on the phone where people are listing off, can I have this? What about, avocados? What about apples? And they're going through every fruit, and then, well, can it be organic? Can it be seeded? And just overall knowing that, raw, fresh fruits and vegetables is the best, and to do the best that you can.
Raw first. Frozen next. Dried, and then canned is how I look at those. Even the dried, you're concentrating things and that kind of thing, but you're not killing off some of the enzymes and nutrients.
Right.
And when you can the food, now I understand completely that when you're in Alaska and stuff, that there needs to be some possibility of planning for winter months where you're not going to get that kind of thing.
Right.
And a lot of people don't have as much deep freeze space. Do the best that you can. I got a call from Alaska not too long ago, and they were like, this is winter. We do not have fruits up here.
Yeah.
And so buying organic frozen and doing the best you can, or having something shipped in if you can afford to do that. Like I said, you cannot stress it. When you stress is the worst thing for detoxification.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to talk about that for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And even like with the dried fruit, you can always for the last year now at least, because I used to just eat dates and all this dried fruit, and now if I'm going to have dried fruit, I at least just soak it in water. You know what I mean? Because you can rehydrate and reconstitute and rehydrate dried fruit to a degree.
Absolutely.
So.
One of the best things that I've been having the last couple of weeks is date water. I bruise the dates a little bit. I put them in a cup. I cover them with water. I let them sit for about 12, 14 hours. And then the next morning I remove the dates. I actually put them in a baggie and freeze them so that I can use those in a smoothie at some point, so you're not wasting. And I drink the water. It's been absolutely incredible for me. The first couple of days I thought, what in the world's going on with my blood sugars? My blood sugars were like...
good to go.
Really, actually pretty good.
Wow.
And that's the only thing that I had done different.
That's really cool, because I'm gonna do that, because I do the same thing I do with dates. I just get the container, I wash them once, and just fill it with purified water and let it sit in there. Because you can keep them in the fridge in the water for weeks. So I'll eat the dates, and then I'll take the date water and I'll use that in the smoothie.
Figs are another thing that's good for that.
Yep.
Bananas, you can do banana water. People don't think about that. You can do banana tea.
Really?
That's excellent at nighttime to help you sleep. banana tea with a little cinnamon and honey.
Awesome. Yeah,
So-
some new things to try.
Yeah.
So, okay, I think that covers it for diet. Yes, one down.
One down.
All right.
Can you believe it? One
Yeah,
down?
One down. So now, kind of on the same side as diet, or what a lot of people put in there is, well, maybe not the same, but is supplementation, or kind of how we look at that is consuming isolated chemistry. So chemistry not in its full, complete ratios through supplementation. So. What are some examples of like supplementation, or what's beneficial of getting all these nutrients or compounds or whatever people are looking for in their complete whole form versus an isolated chemistry, drawn out of the food, or sometimes not even from
Right.
a plant source. So
Well, you have to go back to the way God designed and created. In every fruit and in every vegetable, it has the nutrient components that are necessary and the quantities that are necessary to match what's good for us to be able to absorb them and utilize them. It's got this much magnesium and this much zinc and this much copper and this much potassium and that kind of thing. And it knows when the body ingests that, it's recognizable, it's
Right.
organic. Our body's like, oh, okay.
I know what to do with this.
Yeah, I can do this. When you have an isolated chemistry, first of all, you take an orange. You reach in and you pull out vitamin C, which really isn't truly vitamin C. They've pulled out a component of that. And they go into a lab and they alter it, and then they give it back and they say, you need more vitamin C, thinking that they have perfected on what God has already provided.
Yeah.
Or they say, well, because of the soil and all of this, there's not as much stuff, and so you have to take extra. So let's say that I'm pulling out just calcium. I'm taking calcium at night. Well, first of all, that calcium we found and discovered ages ago needs magnesium in a certain mix to go with it. And then there's little, as Robert says, little brother phosphorus. And so whatever, and we don't even know what else is needed for our bodies to recognize that as organic, or the quantities and proportions. And so what happens is we take that inside and the body's like, you look strange. You're just not exactly what I know.
Something's a little off.
Yeah, something's a little off. Plus, this isn't provided, and that's not provided. And so now our bodies, to break that down, has to pull from our reserves in the areas where it's not in that bottle. And so you're pulling from this reserve and this reserve and this reserve, rather than just going out and eating the fruit or the vegetable that has everything in it in the quantities needed for our bodies to recognize it as organic. Isolated chemistry can put just as much strain and stress on the body as not taking something at all, because of what the body has to do to make up for it.
Yeah, I think that's really important too, because I mean, I'm sure in all your consults and things, and definitely in the calls that we get, the list of supplements that people are taking are crazy.
Yeah.
That's another thing that really surprised me. I knew people were on supplements, but I mean, they were just naming. I've learned so many new supplements and things that are out there that.
I had a client last week where set the whole bag on the desk and pulled out. There had to have been probably 30 bottles in that bag
Yeah.
of things. Now, granted, some of them were herbs, but the majority of them were supplements. Now, if you look at an herb is an actual food. And in that herb are vitamins, minerals,
Yeah.
amino acids. So, I mean, it's well-rounded in the way that it's supposed to be.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
that's my take on isolates.
Okay. Awesome. Well, let's see. So, with the supplements, there's a couple that stand out. That the same main ones that people always ask about. You might be able to think of some more, but mainly the D3, the B12, and maybe like the omegas. Some more specific. Lots of people ask about like iron and different things like that too, but those can definitely be found in food. What about the ones that technically can't be found in food, or there's some controversy between that, like the B12 mainly.
Well, I would stand and argue that you can find B12 in food.
Right.
And even more importantly, and what's not talked about, is that you can find B12 in herbs. You can find vitamin D, in herbs. It's just that we aren't used to looking in those directions. We like to look at, so let's talk about essential amino acids real quick, and which are the amino acids that we supposedly can't produce within the body, and the essential fatty acids that you can't produce within the body. Well, just because you can't produce them in the body doesn't mean that you're deficient in them or that you can't find them. I'm being very confusing here. Let me back up and say this. I'm going to use an example real quick. I was going to wait until we get to the proteins, but I'm just going to do it right now. So give me 1 second. I'm going to grab it. So I have created a protein chain. And protein, it's not actually the protein that we need. It's what makes this up, and that is the amino acids. So when I eat this protein, my body throws it on the floor. My body is actually going to break it apart into individual pieces.
Which takes energy.
Which takes energy. But each one of these is an amino acid. And that is actually what my body is after. It's not after the protein as a whole. And it's the same with essential fatty acids and all of that stuff. We're after the fats, but we're after the parts of it, the building blocks of it. And so once this has happened, I'm doing this very slowly.
See how much work it takes
exactly to break down a protein? Holy cow! So once I have all of this broken down, and I need, remember, enzymes are protein for the most part. Let's say I need enzymes. My body says, well, I need this kind of protein. So you've got all this. So all your fruits and all your vegetables have, to some extent, the essential amino acids along with the other amino acids, some essential fatty acids along with others. They just don't always come in the same food.
Right.
That's why we talked about getting a whole variety. Mm-hmm. Because what may be in this fruit or vegetable may not be in this one. Mm-hmm. But what's not in this one may have this one that one didn't have.
Right.
So eating that variety, everything is broken down. Cationic, anionic. And everything is built back up. Mm-hmm. So if I am eating a well-rounded raw diet or fruitarian diet, and I am called upon to need different protein amino acids for building blocks, everything's in here. My body knows to go in and just start building it again, because I've gotten this amino acid or this fatty acid or this sugar from this, and this, and it's all put together. It's all been, or I should say, broken down, mm-hmm. and it's in here. My body just has to start assembling it. It has it.
Mm-hmm. And I remember years ago when I first read about something like proteins, they were saying that there is no basket, like that your body doesn't hold on to, but that's totally false. Your body has
Absolutely.
Reserves that holds on to all of these individual...
well, it's like B12. A lot of people talk about B12. The liver can store B12 for years. Mm-hmm. Years.
Right.
And does.
Yeah. So where are some, not to change that, but where are some places that we can get B12? Like, dirt, skin,
Well, your B12, that's a soil. That comes from the soil, mm-hmm. actually. That's why a lot of times they say, if you want B12, eat your dirt.
Yeah, or don't wash your veggies.
Exactly. wh- it's a group of microorganisms and that grow within and permeate the soil. And years ago, we used to garden. And we'd go out in our garden and we'd pick that or the fruits and things like that. And so we would get that would be going up in through the plants and things like that, and we'd get that B12. Nowadays, we take those same things, but before we sell them at the grocery store, they stop off at a warehouse and we soak them in chlorine. And we kill off all of the bacteria and the microorganisms that make that up and comprise that. So why do they say that we can get that through the animals? Well, it's because the animals are eating the actual dirt and things, and you're not rinsing them with chlorine. So when you're looking at herbs and things like that, B12, alfalfa is got B12 in it, bladderwrack, oat straw, oh goodness, I'm trying to think, nettles, I mean, there's a list of them. Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of them. Most of the herbs that we carry here, a lot of them have B12 in them.
Okay.
And so it's not a matter of, remember, you can't keep looking at herbs as just medicine. It's food.
Yeah.
It's nutrition. It is loaded with that. And so I was at the doctor's office the other day, and he was trying to talk me into taking some medication. I have to go every 3 months to get insulin, whether I am sick or not. I just have to go every 3 months to get that. Isn't it lovely how we continue to force people to go to the doctor just for that little prescription that they need? Hopefully that'll be changing. But I was talking to him, and he wanted me to do a statin or something like that. I don't remember what. And I told him I wouldn't do it. And he goes, well, why not? And I said, well, I explained what I do and that kind of thing, and some herbs that I was taking. And he goes, you realize that herbs are just pharmaceuticals. That's what I look at them as. And I said, well, why is that? And he goes, well, we took the herbs and we perfected them. And I said, oh, no. You don't perfect on God. That's why you have all the side effects that you have. And so that's what people think. They're used to looking at herbs as medicine, and it's just food. It's nutrients. If I want some amino acids, I'm going to go get some alfalfa. You know, I don't need to sit down with a steak in front of me or some chicken. I can do some spinach or alfalfa, or there's plenty of fruits that's got, the amino acids in them as well.
Right. Yeah, and you see even a lot with the high fruitarians or just high fruit. I mean, more and more, you're seeing bodybuilders and like Ian and just, a lot of different people that are very high level athletics now, and it's getting more and more high athletics. So I think we're going to start to see that it's not, the amino acids, the building blocks are in the fruit, they're in the veggies, they're in everything. We don't have to keep eating dead animals. So so you want to keep going on supplementation? We can run through these different things. We talk about minerals. We kind of already talked about them. Yeah. But I don't know if you want to say anything about minerals.
I don't think we need to, other than there's certain, a lot of people talk about minerals. You're getting minerals. That's one of the reasons to go for a dry fast over a water fast, is you don't then have to try and break down those minerals and things like that that's within the water, and it's a true rest.
Right.
On that.
And another thing that I just remember, probably heard it on a lot of Dr. Morse's videos, but I think people overdo the minerals. They think, minerals are important, obviously, but isn't like when you look at breast milk and different things that there's not this unbelievably high concentration of minerals. Right. So maybe it's a little...
Remember, they're inorganic. It's crystalline mostly that we're working with, and it's not something... your body needs it and it converts it, and there's things that it does need, but that's why a lot of times they call them trace minerals, because we need just a trace amount. Right. And a lot of our foods have those in it because where do they get? They come up from the soil. So.
Okay. Omegas, or your fatty, and the ratios and all that.
Well, again, I like to look at the fruits and the vegetables. You have very few fruits and vegetables that have a high fat content. Most of them have a low moderate. They're high in carbs, they're lower in fat and proteins. Because we don't need a lot of that.
Right.
In fact, if you really truly dig in and start studying, your body does very well on low fat, low protein. I'm not saying no protein, I'm saying lower protein. Our world, especially, we're going to talk about this too, but dialysis and kidney failure and renal failure and all of that is just climbing the charts. And there's research paper after research paper out there on how this is a high protein diet that is causing this. Stress and high protein diets and high fat diets and processed foods, and how harsh that is on the kidneys. In fact, if you look at, I'm skipping ahead. We'll come to that.
Do you want to skip ahead?
No,
Okay.
we'll come to that.
All right, we'll just finish this up. So probiotics.
Probiotics. Okay. So your probiotics is a good bacteria that's supposed to be in the body, and you convert that, and there's a lot of that goes on in the intestine and that kind of thing. Everybody thinks they need to be on a good probiotic. I'm not sure. I do not agree with that at all. First of all, if you're doing the work for your body, and this goes for hormones, this goes for anything, if you're doing the work for your body's going to start sitting back going, well, what do I need to work for? You know, and it's going to slow down on that. Your goal for health is to get your body to work optimally.
Right. So
Not do it for it.
Yep.
It's like if I did everything for my kids growing up,
I was
they'd
just
grow
gonna
up
say.
as spoiled brats.
Right.
You know? And so that's part of our problem with America today is we hand our kids everything.
It's that whole welfare mentality.
Exactly. They don't have to work for it. And so your body is designed to work for it. And so have I ever recommended probiotics before? There's been a few occasions if somebody was on absolute long-term antibiotics, which I had probably talked till I was blue in the face to get them to not do. But if they were going to be on that, but I would not have them on that continually.
Right.
Do a few weeks to build something back up if you absolutely had to or felt you needed to, which I don't think is necessary, but if you felt you had to, and then stop. You don't want your body to get reliant upon that.
Right. And that goes back to, I think we'll talk about it multiple times, but it goes back to the environment with the good flora in the gut. That, it doesn't matter what you add in. I mean, you're going to always have to add it until because you're still kind of treating the symptom. You know, you want to focus on the cause and change the culturing medium in the environment so that they can proliferate and have that balance naturally. Right. With the okay, so digestive enzymes, and you mentioned enzymes before, and specifically, you know, there's enzymes that we find in the food, but then there's also the enzymes, the metabolic enzymes, or the enzymes that we create in the body. So if you want to just...
Nothing can happen within our body unless there is an enzyme present. It just can't.
Yeah.
There's the different, there's neurological, there's the enzymes for that, the neurological aspect of things. There's digestive enzymes. There's, you know, if you have a cancer cell, the body utilizes enzymes once it finds that cancer cell to break that fibrin, the cell wall down of that cancer cell to eliminate it. So enzymes are used in everything. The one I want to talk about the most, though, are the digestive enzymes. And that's because in a diet that we eat, the standard, I'll refer to it as the standard American diet, we cook the living crap out of everything.
Yeah, there's no more enzymes in there. Yeah.
And we kill off those enzymes. And so when we eat that food, guess what? Pancreas, liver, saliva, all of you guys have to work extra hard to provide the enzymes to break that stuff down. I read an article once on the amount of enzymes that were needed in a raw diet was minuscule compared to the amount of enzymes that were needed in a cooked diet.
Right.
Produced from our body. So when you're eating a cooked diet, your body has to generate all this energy to produce these enzymes so that you can break your food down. When you're eating a raw diet, The enzymes are already pretty much provided for you, and you don't need to use very many.
So a lot of people will say with our deficient soil and all these things that the food is lacking the amount of enzymes that it would need even when it's raw.
I disagree with that.
Disagree. Okay.
A plant has got to grow correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And within that is all of the metabolic actions.
So for it to grow, there has to be a sufficient amount
Now,
of...
there may be a little bit lacking in some minerals and maybe some vitamins, depending. I mean, I'm the first to admit we have depleted our resources as far as the ground is concerned.
Right.
We have misused the land and the soil, and granted, that could be a little bit down. But as far as the enzymes go and things like that, I just disagree with that.
Yeah, because a lot of people are really downing the enzymes because they're thinking, oh, I'm having there's less enzymatic action in the food, so my body has to produce more enzymes to make up for that. Therefore, eventually I'll become enzyme deficient, so I'm going to take, more enzymes.
If you're going to eat food that is cooked and depleted of those enzymes because of that cooking, remember when you cook something, you change the chemical composition of it, and you do cook out enzymes. And if you're going to be stubborn and you're going to continue to eat cooked food and things like that on a continual basis, you may need to help your body out there a little bit.
Yeah. Okay.
But from our perspective, if you're eating that raw, whole food diet, you will not need them.
Okay. Awesome.
Especially once you've dealt with malabsorption.
Right. Yeah, that's a big thing that plays into that.
Yeah.
Awesome. We're done with supplementation.
Are we?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. All right. So going on to the next, we're kind of going to go over like the two biggest myths that everyone knows about, that we've all probably heard about, but just to give kind of a clear couple what we think are the best ways to mainly respond, because everyone hears where do you get your protein, and what about too much sugar? I think that sugar feeds cancer, it feeds candida, these different things. So I don't know if you want to start with protein, kind of.
Yeah.
It's a common, multiple times a day when people are calling in,
Right. Well, when you think of protein, I'm going to just throw fats and sugars in there real quick.
Okay.
It is a structure. Anything, you're looking for things that have structure, okay? And a protein has a structure to it. And that's where you get the word or the terminology, the amino acids and building blocks. It's not the actual protein that your body is after. It's after the amino acids. You have to, I don't care if you're eating a steak, well I do, but I don't care if you're eating a steak, a chicken, an avocado, an apple, your body is going to look at that and it has to break that down. When you're eating an apple, the protein structure in there is simple. The fat structure in there is simple. The sugar structure in there is simple. So your body can take that apart very easily. When you're eating, last I heard, beef can take anywhere from 20 to 48 hours or more. When
just
you're
to break down
just
or leave the stomach, or to get in,
to break completely down. And so you're looking at that sitting in a dark, damp, bacteria and parasite infected environment.
Yeah.
Would you like to walk through that, Allie? I wouldn't.
And then most people 3 meals a day have.
And it's sitting in there putrefying.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so let's say I have bacon and eggs for breakfast, and that bacon and eggs right there can take me anywhere from 15 to 20 hours to break down. Lunchtime I have a ham and cheese sandwich. That again can take anywhere probably closer to 20 hours. And then for dinner I'm having steak and a salad, which let's just say that equates to the fat content in the ribbon effect in the meat, the fat content, as to how long it actually takes. But where's my body getting a chance to rest for digestion?
Yeah.
At lunchtime, I'm still breaking down breakfast. Dinner time, I'm still breaking down breakfast and lunch. Breakfast the next morning, I'm still breaking down lunch and dinner from the night before. Our bodies are what happens when you digest? Well, first of all, the pituitary kicks in, the hypothalamus kicks in, the thyroid kicks in. Then you've got the calcium utilization for the parathyroid. Then you've got the adrenals. Then you've got the kidneys. Then you've got the liver.
Just turning off anything, and they never turn off.
Exactly. Yeah. They never get it. What happens if you would go weeks and weeks and weeks at a time and never get a chance to rest? You're not going to function properly.
Right.
And so one of the reasons for detoxification is rest. That's one of the biggest reasons. That was one of the biggest spiritual reasons why people brought detoxification into the body, is to rest, to just be. We need that. Our bodies need that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Our adrenals are overrun. I have not had one person walk in my office that didn't have adrenal issues yet.
Right. Yeah. Crazy.
So.
Okay. What about? Well, so just a couple of things. If I can talk about like what people say, to respond to that. Where do you get your protein? I heard a long time ago this, and I've always used it for a couple of years now. Is people ask me, where do you get your protein, and I just say, hopefully nowhere. Because and then what do you mean? Well, I don't want protein. Why not? Well, because we can't use, we can't use protein. Well, of course we can. It's like, no, we can't. Just because, as you showed, we can't use the protein. Our bodies have to go through all of the effort to break it down to amino acids, which we can then use to build our own protein. Mm-hmm. So, where do you get your protein? Hopefully nowhere, I either do that way, or I just point to nature and I just say, everyone's heard it, but you think everyone's heard it, but a lot of people haven't. You say, this big stallion or this elephant or the ape or chimpanzee or whatever. How are they so strong? They're so muscular. They're not eating any protein, or very little.
Well, when you look at it, when you eat an animal, chicken, fish, beef, whatever, you are getting protein.
Right.
You're getting multiple strands of proteins there. When you eat a fruit or a vegetable, you are getting mainly amino acids, which is what the body needs. So when you're eating the animal protein or the grains, your body has to not only tear it apart, but then you've got to sort.
Yeah.
I need this, here's an amino acid, let's put this over here, but you're waste. And then what happens with all this waste, trimming things off, so to speak, they become acidic.
The body has to do more work just to get rid of that.
Absolutely.
It's like someone giving you a whole bunch of those completed structures like you just had, and then you have to go through the process of eliminating them, throwing some away, and then sorting them out so that you're ready to put them together, versus someone just giving you pre-sorted individual pieces, and you can just build from there. Yeah. So, well, that kind of goes to, what is there protein or these strains of amino acids in plants, or is that only found in
your structures
people
in
talk
your
about
plants?
Plant protein,
right?
But is that
your structures there are a lot less. They're not as tangled. They're not as your body doesn't have to spend as much time tearing them down and untangling them.
Okay.
As now they're more so than, say, your what's in your fruits. They're a little more complicated. That's why it takes us a little bit longer to digest them.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
So.
Okay. Sugar.
Yes.
Sugar. There's obviously the different types of sugar, which we could go over, the monosaccharides, polysaccharides, and things, but also just, how does the sugar, maybe a little bit of brief anatomy or physiology on how the sugars feed the cells, how that process works, and then the whole myth on, sugars just feeds candida, feeds cancer, and that whole thing.
Right. Well, your fruits, okay, first of all, your body feeds off of carbohydrates. That is the body's fuel. Now, it can get fuel from fat and protein, but the easiest for it to get fuel from is fruits. So people who are going on low-carb diets, they're producing massive amounts of work within the body and waste, because the body then has to go and convert fat and proteins into glucose. When you look at fuel, fuel is for cell regeneration. Our cells divide and replicate. That takes energy. When we cut ourselves, healing, that takes energy. And we have to have that and find that energy from somewhere. A lot of people are like, well, when I switch to a fruit diet, I'm just starving. Well, your body's used to having to convert fats and proteins because most of us didn't eat a lot of fruits before we started doing this.
Right.
And so now you have to understand, when you eat that fruit, that's immediate fuel. I mean, literally within an hour or so, most of the fruit is broken down, maybe with the exception of like the bananas and the coconuts and the fattier fruits. But most of those are broken down, and that's immediate fuel. Well, if you're going throughout your day and you've got all these depleted reserves because you've been so exhausted and your adrenals are down and the thyroid's not functioning properly, and your body is using this to get things moving and heal, you're using up a ton of energy. So at first, you're going to need large quantities of fruits.
And maybe a little more often.
And a little more often.
Right.
But as the balance starts to switch and the acidity starts to leave and the regeneration is taking place and is having to be utilized less and less as far as the healing, like this is damaged, this is degenerated, this needs to be healed. I'm talking regular cell turnover rather than healing.
Right.
Okay? Your energy consumption is going to start getting less and less, and the same amount of foods that you needed at the beginning, you will not need near as much as at the end.
A lot less is going to go a lot further.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
So, and then just the conversion there of glucose, it's called glycolysis or something like that. I always forget. That's an actual 10-step process of enzymes that need to be that break that down, and it can happen very, very quickly. And so that's why fruits are the best. If you need that, that big hit, make yourself a smoothie with some bananas and things like that in it. If you've got that you know is coming.
Right.
Now, and other times that can actually slow things down a little bit as well.
Yeah.
The detox process and
and that's where it's a little confusing on how the same foods can produce two different results depending on where you're at with your health and everything. So
well, with each, we need ATP. That's the fuel that we need. And so with every glucose molecule, remember your body is breaks things down for the amino acids, the fatty acids, and the glucose.
Yeah.
You need those. That's what it breaks everything down to. And so when you're looking for fuel, if you do not have fructose or the glucose, then your body, for every molecule of glucose that your body breaks down, it produces 2 of ATP. And if you don't have that readily available, then again, I'm going to use tons of energy and I'm going to have to go and pull fat and protein to break that down.
And not only does it, like you said, it requires more energy to pull that, and then it's a dirtier fuel. It burns dirty, basically. So you have so much unnecessary residues that then need to be dealt with. And it's just so much extra energy is just used processing the wrong fuel for our bodies when we don't.
Yeah. When we had our house up in Indiana, we had a fuel tank that we supplied our heat and stuff with. It left residue everywhere. It wasn't a clean burning fuel. Your fruits are clean burning fuels.
Right.
And very easy to access.
Yeah. So, and I don't know if I don't know if this should go in right here, but when they're not, basically if the fruits are stagnant, I mean then that turns into the fermentation. So and they're basically not being used. That kind of goes to the next thing about how sugar feeds candida. And those myths. So what do you? Because how I look at it is kind of like sugar sugar or glucose or whatever feeds every cell, whether it's a cancer cell or whether it's not.
Exactly.
And it's going to feed candida if it's there, but you know.
The reason that they say that it feeds cancer is because they don't truly understand what cancer is. Cancer is a normal cell that has become damaged and is mutated.
Mhm.
It's still hungry.
Right, still a cell.
It's still a cell. It still needs food, but it packs on excess protein until that cell wall is 10 to 12 times thicker than an average wall. And now it's bigger, it's mutated, so it's badder, and it's going to steal your lunch money.
Right.
So the cells around it, it's going to start bullying. And pretty soon it's going to start stealing the nutrition from them because it needs more nutrition. And then those are going to become weaker. The toxins and stuff are going to be able to damage them more and create more mutations. And pretty soon a single cell has turned into hundreds of thousands of cells that are now measurable at a doctor's office.
Okay.
But this is the thing that I like to tell people when they say, well, fruit is a sugar and sugar feeds cancer. You've forgotten one thing. Within that fruit, there are all kinds of phytochemicals and antioxidants and things that cancer hates. If I was being searched out to be destroyed, the last thing that I'm going to do is invite that enemy into my home. And if a cancer cell invites the sugar from the fruit into that cell,
there's other stuff coming with it.
There's other stuff coming with it to destroy that cancer cell.
Right.
So you can guarantee that it's going to get its sugar if it has to. But if it's feeding on donuts and things like that,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're feeding that cancer cell.
Yeah. It's like a sugar isn't a sugar isn't a sugar. There's, big differences.
Right.
And you're bringing in the other, like you said, the other properties and the properties of alkalization and hydration and things.
Absolutely.
And so it's almost like the same thing that's, feeding the cancer is really the thing
Destroying
that's
it.
just dissolving and destroying
Exactly.
the cancer.
It's going to get its food. So if the only thing you're providing for it is the fruit, sugars, you're going to eventually penetrate that and you're going to destroy it with all the, you're standing at the door ringing the doorbell, but you got a army full of people behind you getting ready to walk in that door as soon as it's answered.
Right. Yep.
So when people say that fruit sugar feeds cancer, I'm sorry, that's humorous to me in a sad way. Because it just tells me they don't understand.
Yeah, and it's in a way it's kind of the exact same with candida, right?
Absolutely.
Because the same thing that feeds candida is really the thing that's, moving, changing the environment, which we talked about is the most important thing to balance out the gut flora and all the candida.
Well, the other thing is you take a broom into a room that hasn't been dusted and swept for a while and you start doing this, you're going to start, all these dust motes are going to start. You're going to start stirring things up. And it's the same way with the candida. People are like, oh, when I eat candida, my skin breaks out and this comes out and that comes out. You're just stirring things up so that the body can start moving it out.
Right. I
That
love your
has
little
to happen.
analogies. They're so good. They're little stories. Okay, awesome. I think, are we done with that one? Well, kind of still part of this and maybe almost back to the diet part, but just real quick, not that we're going to get into food combining, but the fact that there is an issue where fruit can be, or any sugar, but even fruit can be, detrimental if you're eating a steak and some oatmeal and then eating
Yeah.
the sugar.
Well, you have the whole process of fermentation that happens. And fermentation can create that sugar alcohol. And that sugar alcohol can be a problem. And so that's definitely not where you want to go. You do not want the fruit and stuff to sit there and ferment. Or even if you were to match, that's why they say don't mix grains with meat. Because the same thing will happen with the grains.
Right.
While the body is, remember, it's a high stress situation for us to eat animal protein because it's so hard to break that down. And so while we're doing that, the grains are over here fermenting. And it's causing the same issues.
Yeah. So just to be aware of that, even if it's not meat, if it's something, you got to look at the bowel transit time. And if you're eating something that has a slow bowel transit time, and then you're eating something that digests fast, you're going to
Yeah.
have putrefaction or fermentation.
It would be the same thing if you were fruitarian and you ate some bananas or coconut meat with watermelon.
Mhm.
Watermelon's 90%. It's probably one of the faster things to
Yes.
digest.
So you got to eat that first, and then eat the other. That's what I always. And so many people, including like my parents, we always have fruit as the dessert. As I was growing up, it'd always be the little fruit cup
Yep.
after the big hearty meal and all that
Yeah.
stuff. And a few years ago when I really started to pay attention, I'm like, oh, you got to eat that first. You got to eat that first. But they will have this sweet tooth and they leave it till the end. But
Yeah.
what can you do? So, okay, we're done with that one. This is a huge one. All these are really, really good and a lot, like probably the most popular or most common questions. But this is definitely one of the most common ones, and that is like excessive thinness while detoxing and muscle loss.
Mhm.
And basically, why that is, and people can eat as much as they want sometimes and they're still losing weight, and then they're detoxing and they're getting too thin, and can I still detox if I'm this thin? When is too thin to keep detoxing, and why is this happening?
Yeah.
Can I detox and still stay the same or gain muscle? And kind of the mindset people need to have going into that, or the understanding.
Well, first of all, there's two school of thoughts there. The first one is more people are malabsorbed and do not realize it.
Yeah.
So when they switch to a healthier diet, they're going to drop weight.
Mm-hmm.
They just are. Because it's going to take a while for them to reestablish or rebalance that gut health, as far as the small intestine where you pick up all the majority of your nutrients and stuff.
Even if they're trying to overeat and doing all these things, you're still gonna, because when you're detoxing, you're breaking up fat, you're breaking up,
Yeah.
weak tissue and different things. You're gonna lose weight, right? Even if you're
Exactly.
trying to eat a lot more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you detox, your body's breaking down. It is breaking down stuff to get rid of it. So if you went in and you bought a property that you were going to fix up, before you could go in and bring in the new paint and the new wallpaper and the new draperies and stuff like that, you've got to go in and tear out the old. You've got to tear up the old carpet before you can put in the new. You have to tear out the old drywall before you can put in the new. You have to scrape off the old wallpaper before you can install or repaint or whatever. This is just fact. On a roof, I think it's only like maybe 2 layers you can go before, that you're supposed to go before. The proper way to do it is to tear off the old and put on the new.
Right.
But a lot of people try and,
7, 8 layers. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so you're going to break that down. Most people don't realize the fact that they've got excess fecal matter that's been there. That can be anywhere from 5 to 20 pounds. You've got excess lymphatic fluid. To be honest with you, that can be anywhere from 5 to who knows, depending on size of a person.
Right.
You take somebody that's 300 pounds, they're going to have a lot more fat. I mean, some of that is fat, but a lot of that is actually lymph fluid and lymphedema that they don't even realize
Right.
is there. So you've got all these processes that are happening and all these things. You're tearing out old stuff, you're getting rid of old waste, you're moving out old lymph and things like that. And so you're gonna lose weight. I can have a guy walk in, he's 180 pounds, and I've got a few things I want to fix. And then lo and behold, he comes back and he's like, I'm down to 130 pounds, I don't know what happened. Your body is breaking things down. One thing I tell people, we've never lost anyone to weight loss. We never have. I remember one girl, she was fanatical about detoxing. Literally fanatical about detoxing. And she was detoxing. She had gotten herself down to, I think it was 53 pounds.
What?
She was bedridden, couldn't get out of bed. And we had a little come to Jesus meeting. And I put her for 2 months on a building program. When I talked to her I put her on it for 2 months, but I talked to her in 4 weeks to see how she was doing. She had just fruit, mind you.
I was going to ask what this consisted
Just
of.
fruit.
So just fruit. Yeah.
Just fruit,
Just a
no
little bit
vegetables.
more of the more dense fruits.
Yep. She had gained 11 pounds, and she was up walking around.
Wow.
She was a different person. The problem is we have issues and we want to fix them, and we tend to latch onto an idea and it's got to be this way.
Right.
I'm not completely cleaned out yet. There's no way that I can take a break from detoxing.
Yeah.
And we are going to talk about the whole detoxing and building thing, I think, here in a little bit.
Yeah.
But when it comes to that, you've got to be balanced in all things, and you've got to understand that the body is going to break things down before it can build things up. This is the new, but in order to get to this, you have to get rid of this.
Yeah. And I think that there's a couple different things that go into play. I mean, there is definitely a possibility of people switching to raw and not eating enough as well. That's definitely a big thing. A lot of people I talk to, it's like, I'm thinking that they're just going to have to, I've lost all this weight, or I'm getting so thin, and I'm getting ready to explain them about, malabsorption, all these things. And I'm like, well, first let me just ask you what you're eating. Yeah. It's like, well, I had, 3 oranges this morning and
5 grapes for lunch, and I had...
And I'm like, and they're like, well, that's all, but, and that's like more than they have been eating. And it just blows my mind. It's like, you have to realize, not that we care about calories, but if you're even trying to compare apples to apples with calories, you have to eat a lot more raw food. That's why people are like, what do you eat? And I'm like, well, it just depends. Some days I won't eat anything if I'm fasting, but if I'm just eating normally, like, I'll eat 8 to 12 mangoes, especially those little honey mangoes, or I'll easily eat 5 to 10 oranges, just depending on how I feel. And people are like, how can you possibly eat that much? And it's like, well, it might not be that easy at the beginning, but you'll be able to eat more. And then what I like now is I don't have to even eat a lot or a little. You just eat. That's why I like, if you eat the whole food and you just eat slow, when you're done.
Right.
Especially if you're eating mono meals, it's like impossible to eat one type of fruit slowly and consciously and be present with your food and overeat or undereat. Because you just eat until you're really satiated. But until you have that awareness of your body, you might have to eat a little bit more with the fruits and different things. But on the same hand, there is malabsorption. So you could be eating enough and still be losing weight. Pretty easy. Yeah. There's malabsorption, and obviously there is the possibility of hyperthyroid, right?
Yep, hyperthyroid.
But I think the majority
is a very real possibility on that one. Yeah. Pancreatic secretion is actually less if you're hyperthyroid, and so you're not going to be breaking your foods down as much as you should, and so a lot of those are going to get flushed right from the small from the stomach into the small intestine, and they're going to be too big to be picked up by the little villi, and they're going to be flushed right out into the stool a lot of times. I'm not saying completely, but that's what you see a lot of times when people say they see things in their stools and stuff. I'm not saying they have hyperthyroidism. I'm just saying that pancreas enzyme secretion is down during hyperthyroidism.
Okay.
So I also want to talk just a little bit about those who go on a fruit all raw diet or an all fruit diet at first and gain weight.
Yeah, that'd be good.
And there you're looking at, that's a combination of things. It doesn't happen to a whole lot of people, but that is a combination of things where, number one, you've got weak adrenals. That's sugar metabolism.
Right.
I eat fruit, I feel sluggish type of thing. Second of all, it's usually paired with a low thyroid, which is your metabolism, which tells you how quickly you're going to metabolize things. The longer it takes to metabolize something, the more that it's stored into fat. And then you've got dehydration. Over dehydration, where the body is finally saying, finally, I'm getting energetic.
It's not going to let any of that
hydration.
Go. Yeah, right.
It's going to hang on to that for as long as it can, and you're going to start puffing up just a little bit until the body starts recognizing. It's kind of like you found a guy in a desert and you offered him a canteen, and you know if he keeps drinking he's going to make himself sick. He should sip on it a little bit, but he's starved, he's thirsty, he's dying. That's what the body is saying when you start on these fruits and these high energy hydration. You can hold on to it for a little while. It will, in all things, balance out. So you just got to be patient.
Okay, awesome. Well, I mean so that's thinness. What about, and we talked about like you talked about a lot of the fat and just different things. What about like weakness, like actual muscle loss?
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean it's one thing to lose weight and just be okay with it. I mean you might have to deal with your family and people ridiculing you, but at least I know a lot of people are like, I'm just so thin. Well, how do you feel? I feel great. It's like, well then who cares what other people say? But if people are like, I'm so weak I can't go make my juice
Mm-hmm.
or whatever they're trying to do. What about muscle loss? Is that a time when they should back off or change something, or?
That is a time where I would transition. I would be utilizing green drinks with that, and I would be doing things like some maca root, some of your, now maca root and chia seeds and I think alfalfa are considered complete, like they have all the amino acids and stuff. And so utilize some of those things. Superfoods would be excellent to do this with. Understand, part of this is weak adrenals, part of this is parathyroid. The body's flushing a lot of wrongly stored calcium. And it's the calcium that actually equates to muscle and works with muscle. So a lot of times you can be losing some of that muscle if your parathyroid is weak and not working correctly.
When you say wrongly stored, do you mean like the calcium is from not a good source, or what do you mean?
It can be from not a good source, but what I mean mainly is bone spurs, kidney stones, calcified nodules, that kind of thing. And as the body starts to break that down, understand if you've got weaknesses are exposed with detoxification. So if you have a weak parathyroid and your body's starting to flush things out, it can flush out some of that calcium that's stored. Mm-hmm. And the body can also pull that from muscles, bones, hair, nails, teeth.
Right. Okay. And we're going to talk more about parathyroid too. Yeah. So this kind of goes into thinness and muscle loss. A lot of questions from different people that are, yoga teachers or cyclists or bodybuilders and stuff, if they can continue exercising or if they can't or if they should. And there's different reasons. Some people are just so into the exercise modes they feel.
This is what you should do during detox.
Should we just do this for the rest of the video?
No. Understand one thing. If you're not moving, your lymph is not moving. Mm-hmm. Okay? So when it comes to, and I've had a lot of people say, but Robert says don't exercise. That's not what we're talking about.
Right.
Okay? We're talking about high impact, heavy muscle, strenuous, the things that are really building up that lactic acid. That's what you want to be cautious of, especially if you have a weak parathyroid, because you can start exposing that and then you can go to lift that, 250 pounds that you did before and, oh, I just pulled something. Mm-hmm. Oh,
yeah.
That kind of thing, because you're exposing that weakness so that your body can go in and fix it. When you're looking at exercise, you have to move. Your lymphatic system doesn't have a heartbeat. It doesn't have that pump like your blood does. It is by muscle contraction. Even if you just lay in bed before you get out of bed and do a full body stretch, you've just moved lymph. Mm-hmm. You walk from the bedroom into the sun porch and stretch in front of the sunrise. You've just moved some lymph. It's very important to understand that even if I'm sitting here not moving, but I'm deep breathing, I am engaging my complete diaphragm and moving all my lymph in through here.
Right.
It is lymph movement that you want. Yoga is perfect for stretching but not overdoing it.
Yeah, because there's some intense yoga that would probably not be in that same category.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I want to hit on this a little bit more, so try and remind me when we talk about sugar levels and glucose and that in the blood. But if you have high sugars, that is the last thing you want to do is go out and exercise, because you're going to actually release more sugar into the bloodstream and your sugars will go up. Number one. Number two, weightlifting and things like that, for whatever reason, produces high sugars as well. So you just want to play, know your body. Know your body. but definite movement. Walking, casual strolling, swimming, the low impact stuff.
I mean, I've always heard, even before I was watching these videos, that the best lymphatic movement is just simply walking.
Yeah.
Because of its rhythmic in nature, and it's very low impact. And
Sometime when you're walking, just reach up and feel back here in the back of the neck and feel the movement as you're walking.
right.
And how that starts opening these channels and eliminating and allowing the brain to drain
Absolutely.
in a good way.
Yeah. Okay, where are we? Cycles. So we talked about negative effects of too much exercise, the best forms of exercise. I think we already touched on this, but I mean the cycles of cleansing and building.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you took that girl who had done a lot of detoxing, put her on what you said 2 months
Yeah.
of detoxing, and I think I've asked you this question before. Can you go like cleanse one day, build the next day, or cleanse 1 week and build the next week, or like how long do you think? And it's obviously always individual. Everything is usually can be individualized, but what's a good time frame on, you know, or maybe even just maintenance? Because when people are kind of where they want to be, you know, cleansing.
So let's look at somebody who first comes to me. Let's say they've got something really serious like cancer. You just about can't take time to do a lot of building.
Right. Yeah.
You have to clean because it's the cancer that's destroying the body. And you have to get that out of there. And you can't do that. I mean, you can maybe slow it down just on a building program if you're doing just fruits and maybe a few vegetables. You can maybe slow that down, but if you're in stage 3 and 4,
You gotta go.
which is when we get most people
Right.
with it, that's when they've tried everything else and then
they go.
they find us. When you're in that state, you can't really afford to do a whole lot of that. You're going to be doing some building with just your nutrition, the huge amount of nutrition that you're putting into the body, because the body is going to have to replicate itself, and it's going to call upon the good nutrition to do that. Okay? If you're not in a serious situation, doing a couple months of a detox and then taking a month and building, and taking a couple more months to detox and taking a month to build, and that kind of thing, I don't see anything wrong with that. It's not like you're sitting there with, I've been given the diagnosis of 3 months to live.
Right.
Okay? You can take some time to do that. Obviously, the older you are, the more you want to move things along. And then once you get into a maintenance, this is my dream. When I get into a maintenance, is one of two things. During the summer months and the spring months, when there's all kinds of fruits and the harvest is bountiful, so to speak, that is my detoxing. That's when every fruit is readily available at different times and different seasons and that kind of thing.
So easy.
6 months, go ahead and cleanse, go ahead and detox. And then over the course of the winter and the fall months, do some building. That's when I would add the more greens in and the more, salads, and maybe even a little bit of steamed, although rarely, and maybe some nuts and seeds. One of my favorite meals, if I'm going to cheat, is a raw lasagna. I absolutely love it with the zucchini noodles and the, that kind of thing. And so, just taking a little bit, slowing things down, kind of like getting ready to hibernate. Slowing things down, round it out more, fruits and vegetables, get those reserves stored up, because winter's coming. And that's what I would do. There's so many different ways that you can build and detox and build and detox, but being balanced is the key.
Absolutely. Awesome. Okay, and the last thing I have on here, we can do this or not, food, herbs, and strategies to use when building. So specific foods, specific herbs, and I know you have some good herbs and different things for that. So.
Yeah. Oh goodness. When it comes to building, I love the richer fruits. The dates, the bananas, the coconuts. I don't get me wrong, it's not that I don't love the other fruits, but I could literally sit and go through a huge papaya or two. That's when I incorporate the green drinks more, and your spirulina and superfoods and things like that. As far as that goes, your herbs, oh my word, there's some amazing herbs for building muscle. A lot of rich, high amino acid fruits and herbs that will do that. There's amalaki root, there's maca, there is pine pollen. Goodness, I'm just trying to think of the different ones that
I got
alfalfa.
that list of, I can't remember any of those on there.
Yeah, alfalfa is another really good one to add to that. But if you're looking, you can find it. Just be very careful of. Remember, anybody can say anything and make it sound logical.
Right.
The more you get to know the true you and your body, the more you will recognize, you made that sound good, but that's not what I know to be true.
Yeah.
And so you just have to be careful not to get tripped up by every, Tom, Dick, and Harry that's out there spreading things.
Yeah. That's probably the most important thing, getting in tune with your body. Okay, awesome. And then, strategies when you're building too, and this is just kind of a one-off thing, but if you are in the place where you're going to want to build muscle, you do have to create a stress to the body to build muscle. If you're trying to actually, because you're not going to increase muscle by just eating.
Right.
You're going to have to, whether it's just working out or whether it's actually lifting, you have to create.
Well, to create that, you have to rip and tear and rebuild.
Yeah.
It's the rebuilding that adds to the muscle.
Right.
The repair that you just did is what adds to the muscle.
Yeah.
So that's exactly right.
Okay, another one. Done. Awesome. So this is another big one, and we talked about it when we talked about the parathyroid and everything, but connective tissue weaknesses, just, in general, what that, all the different veins and prolapsing and aneurysms and different things where you can, basically, what symptoms would people have or could look at to point back to the parathyroid or point back to calcium utilization or connective weakness, and then the best ways to cleanse and strengthen, because that's a big question, the different herbs and products that we have and stuff.
So some of the things that you would look for there is depression is a big one. If you're a lot of people, especially mothers who have given and given and given to the baby during pregnancy, go into postpartum depression. But then there's also just depression as a whole that you have to deal with. Remember, calcium is your communication from nerve to nerve, and so that depression can really be affected by that. You've got bunions, you've got bone spurs, you've got varicose veins, you've got spider veins, you've got wrinkles, you've got hernias, fragile bones, anything to do with the spine or skeletal structure.
issues.
Absolutely. That connective tissue, retinal tears, things like that. People don't think about it, but that is a weakness in that connective tissue there. So you would strengthen the eyes. There's just so much goes back to the parathyroid that it's not even funny. And your parathyroid actually sits right behind the thyroid, but they don't have a lot in common. And so a lot of people think that they should have a lot in common and they don't. And so I remember talking with one of the teachers when I was in class, and I said something about my parathyroid, and he's like, oh, that's not important. You don't need to worry about that.
They just lump it together usually.
Yeah. I'm like, seriously?
Yeah.
Wait a minute here.
Yeah. So what specifically, how does the parathyroid, what is the connection there? Obviously calcium utilization, but how does that?
So if you're not utilizing and storing calcium properly, your body is going to say, we need more. Okay? If my husband gets into his wallet to get out a $100 bill because he needs to pay for it, but he forgot and put that money, he wasn't putting it in the wallet, he was putting it over here somewhere, and he goes in to see that it's empty, he's like, well, I'm going to have to get more out of the bank.
Yeah.
Okay?
So he's stealing from the reserves.
Exactly. So basically, you got to understand that your body is going to produce parathyroid hormone, PTH, that tells the body it needs more. And then that is going to send a message to the bones saying we need more calcium.
Okay.
Or the nails, the teeth, the hair.
So is it the PTH that is the hormone that utilizes calcium? Or
It's the hormone that tells the body to either produce more or produce less.
Okay.
So if you are hyperthyroid, your body would actually start slowing down on producing the PTH.
Or hyperparathyroid, right? Or
Hyperparathyroid, yes.
Yeah.
Hyperparathyroid. Sorry, did I say hyperthyroid?
yeah, you're just lumping them in together.
Look at me, look at what I just did. So, if you're hyperparathyroid, your body's going to start producing less and less so that your body doesn't start overproducing
Okay.
again. And sometimes can even stop. If you're not producing enough, then it's going to produce more of that PTH.
Okay.
So that it's going to then communicate, we need more calcium, and it's actually that communicates with, it's the adrenal or the kidney itself to hold that in reserve in the pancreas so that it's holding back calcium and then you're not getting as much as well.
Okay.
So it can affect in multiple ways. Remember, nothing happens here that doesn't happen here. And nothing happens with one organ where another one's not completely impacted, like not impacted at all.
Right. Total connection within
Yeah.
the whole body, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That was pretty good. I think we're done with that one. Awesome.
Some of the best ways I think of strengthening that, though,
Oh, yeah, that's great.
the ones that I know of is just get rid of the acidosis around it.
Mm-hmm.
What's damaging the function in the first place. Give it good nutrition, high nutrition. And then as far as herbs and stuff like that, things to strengthen bones and nails and teeth and hair and, that kind of thing. Especially if you're eating your fruits and your vegetables raw, you're getting the highest quality calcium that you can get out of that.
Okay.
And your herbs, same thing. Horsetail and alfalfa and things that are high that have a good calcium content. But then horsetail is good for that.
Like
think
with
it's the-
our formulas, or are you just talking about?
Bones and connective
Right.
tissue
Yeah.
is excellent for it. If you need to for a while, be on a glandular.
Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what I was getting at. So I mean, obviously the endocrine balance will touch on all the endocrine glands, but really to be a little bit more focused, you'd go to the bones and connective tissue,
Yep.
and then beyond that, a parathyroid glandular.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For a minimal time. I like to do parathyroids for a month or two and then take a break and see what the response is. If my nails were getting hard and I took a break and now they're getting ridged again and soft, I know I wasn't on the parathyroid glandular long enough
Right.
and that my parathyroid still isn't kicking in like it should. And so I'll go back on the parathyroid glandular for another month or so and just keep testing.
Mhm.
Keep testing.
Yeah. And just to eliminate a lot of excess phone calls, to be on a glandular, you have to get an appointment with someone at the clinic, so like Marcie or any of the counselors. 'Cause a lot of people call in about the parathyroid glandular, but
Yeah.
okay. So we're done with parathyroid?
Mhm.
Awesome. All right. Kidney filtration
Yes.
is our next thing. So kidney filtration is huge. Dr. Morse always talks about, kidneys, adrenals, and lymph, and one of the first things we're working for is getting the kidneys to filter, because how are we going to get rid of any of this waste if the channel of elimination is blocked?
Right.
So I don't know if you just want to kind of talk in general about
Filtration.
yeah. I'm kind of like to know the minute details of things, which I know isn't always good, but like how the kidneys actually filter this lymph and kind of how that works, and then obviously the connection with the adrenals being the kind of controller of,
Right.
of the kidneys.
Well, obviously your adrenals do control. They control the weight, the rate that you eliminate fluids and excess things. If you're eliminating excess vitamins or minerals, or obviously proteins, if you're breaking down too many proteins and things like that, that's where the adrenals come in and tell the kidneys what to get rid of and what not to. You've got about 1 million little filters in every kidney. Now you're talking a kidney, You're talking a little organ, okay, that's like this. And you've got about 1 million filters in there. And so I'm not going to get into, we don't even have the time to get into how the kidneys filter it, or lymph and all of that. Regardless of whether it's the kidneys filtering lymph from the actual lymphatic system, or as that we believe, or as the allopathic industry believes it's, through the blood and all of that. It doesn't matter, because the kidneys still filter lymph, even if it's through the blood.
Right.
They still filter lymph. And when you're filtering waste like that, you're talking all that excess junk that you're getting rid of, gummed up stuff, things that have met with acidosis and have crystallized. And all those little filters can get backed up and clogged. And when that happens, your filtration, your kidney function becomes less and less and less, which causes the lymphatic system, in any way that it is filtered, to be filtered less and less and less. If my sweeper bag is full, I'm not picking up near the trash as if I had an empty sweeper bag or a cleaned one.
Right.
If my pool filter has all kinds of leaves and junk in it, it's not going to filter out all the bugs and the stuff and the junk. You're going to see that starting to back up on top of the water. And you need to keep those kidneys. Your kidneys filter everything. Everything. A lot of people talk about the liver as a detoxing organ or so, but what filters the cells of the liver? The kidneys.
Yeah.
Everybody talks about the intestinal tract, the colon, as the elimination thing. But what filters the cells of the intestinal tract, the liver, the colon? It's the kidneys. And yet we don't even think about that half the time.
Right.
Literally in every quote-unquote disease that you could name or label, that you could give something, the root cause can always be tied back to kidney filtration and lymph stagnation. Every single time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, whether it's something in your toe or your head or
Yep.
your heart,
Yep,
everywhere there's cells, the lymph has to get
exactly.
back down to the kidneys. Unless it comes out a different way, like, I mean,
A boil, a cyst.
a boil, like a fontanel is like an
Yep.
alternative route of elimination, but
Yep.
that's usually more of the healing crisis in ways we don't want it to come out.
Right, exactly,
Um,
exactly. And then one of the things, should I filter forever, that was on that thing to ask. Absolutely.
As
Absolutely.
long as you have ways to filter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You don't just say, well, I'm just going to take the trash out once every 6 weeks, which most of us don't even think about it that often.
Right.
Your bodies were designed to filter every single day. That's why you pee and poop every single day.
Yeah. And I think with that, a lot of that question is when people are saying, well, what about when I'm totally clean and I detox and all this stuff? Well, you're still moving your body every day.
Yep.
Your cells are still going through their cycles and still eliminating. So you're always going to have some amount of metabolic. If you are completely
Right.
100% clean and you're just laying there all day without creating, just by
Just
breathing.
your thoughts
and by,
create waste.
Right.
I mean, just your thoughts, especially if they're stressful, creates metabolic waste. It does. There's never going to be a point that you are not creating waste unless you've kicked the bucket.
Yeah.
And then you don't have to worry about
Yeah, that doesn't matter. So another pretty common question is how much sediment should I have, and should it be every time I urinate and all that? And I think it's pretty common to see that it's going to vary between each person and depending on what they're doing. If you're going through a deep detox versus,
Right.
it's just
If you've hit upon an area one day that was calcified and it starts breaking up, you're going to see a lot more, and the chunks are going to be a lot bigger.
And sometimes you
day.
can't always, I've had some times where I wasn't expecting, and there's a lot of filtration. Other times where I'm digging deep, and it's just not as much as I, thought there was going to be.
You eat a lot of junk food or things like that, you're probably going to see some sediment.
Yep, that's the first
Your
time.
body's like, I want to get rid of this now.
Yep, the first time I ever saw a lot of filtration, and I've talked to a lot of people that had the same thing. They're like, I ate really bad last night, and I saw filtration. What's going on? And I always tell them one of the first times I did was like 28 days into a juice fast a couple of years ago, and I had some crazy thing, and anyway, I ended up binging out on some really bad food, and the next day it was so thick.
Yep.
You know, and I'm thinking, what's going on? Do I have to eat bad food to filter? But I mean, it's just, you know, it's my body was getting cleaner and filtering better and better, and then all of a sudden I just put in all this in it, so it had to kind of, you know, get it out. But when it comes to how much should you see, ultimately you want to see it every day.
Yes.
Right? I mean, at least, I always tell people, at least, you know, probably in the morning or whenever
Yeah.
you have not consumed a lot of, because if you're eating a lot of watermelon or water or coconut water or even high water content fruits, it's going to be diluted to a degree, so you're not going to be able to see it. But every time in the morning, you know, you should be able to
And not seeing big particles doesn't mean you're not filtering.
Right.
I mean, some of that can be just average filtration. And remember, your cells are microscopic, so that the waste from them is going to be even smaller.
Right.
So if you can see it building up and you can see the big chunks, you're getting into some territories that were really backed up, and thank God for that.
Right. Yeah. And just because it's a common question, basically how you check is, you know, by urinating in a clear jar. But then a big thing that some people don't do, most of you guys probably know, but is to let it sit for up to a day. Some people put it in their refrigerator. I don't know. But, you know, 12 to 24 hours, and then you'll because lots of times it doesn't look like there's anything in there, but you let it sit and you'll see that white film or the mucousy films on the bottom.
Yep.
So, okay, so the top strategies to have this happen, because a lot of people, you know, I would say the people that I talk to, well over 90% are not filtering at all when they check. Would you say that it's...
Yeah, it's pretty close.
It's like that. So, and some people it takes days, some people it takes weeks, some people it takes months or
It took
whatever.
me 9 months to see kidney filtration and 14 to see it on a consistent basis.
Wow. Yeah.
So, but I was diabetic for, when I started, 30 some years, 35, 36 years.
Mm-hmm.
That took a while.
Yeah.
You've got to be patient with your body. Your body, you're doing what you need to do. You're doing the sweeping. You're doing the rest of the stuff. You got to wait for those filters to start getting cleaned out.
Yeah.
Fruits, herbs, and some of your fruit, vegetables, and things will help get that going. But you're never going to get that moving with grains and cheese and animal protein and dairy.
Right.
You just aren't.
Unless you're doing like the shock to the system thing. Yeah, they're not good.
Yeah.
Okay, so the top.
I can sandblast my wall, but that doesn't mean it's a good thing.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So some other tips, obviously the fruit and the things, and then you know, the neurolymphatic points.
Neurolymphatic pressure points are...
You know, and I always saw that, but I never really did it, and I think a lot of people don't really actually take the time to do that. But when I started doing that, and this is when I was back home in the Midwest, so I had somebody there to kind of help me with the back, like
You
once
should have
or
brought your
twice
shepherd's
a day.
hook in. He's
I
got
know.
this hook thing that is awesome to get into those little areas.
It's like a back hook you can massage yourself. People just come in and look at me like I'm crazy.
If you ever can't get him on the phone, he's in working my back. Yeah, I'm just teasing.
We should have like a co-op thing where
There
we just,
you go.
you know, everyone goes around and gives each other anyway. But yeah, once I started having that done, you know, I can do the front, but help with the back twice a day. I actually saw a big difference. I felt more pressure in my neck, and then it was releasing, and just different things like that.
Right.
So, and then the hot and cold, right on the
Hot and cold compresses,
hot and cold
absolutely.
compresses, hot and cold showers.
Dry fasting.
Yeah, and then I think dry fasting is a big thing. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's like a really key thing that people can use, but then obviously you have to be knowledgeable about it. You don't want to just...
I have every single one of my clients that will agree to it. Or when it gets time, like we've introduced things to them and they're starting to do some moving,
Mm-hmm.
I have them do at least one 24-hour dry fast a week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So dry fasting obviously
And
is...
most absolutely love it once they get into the routine.
Right. So it's just not consuming any foods or liquids or herbs or anything.
Right.
And I always talk to people about this. I'm like, well, just think about, everyone knows how good, you know, a water fast or a juice fast or any type of just intermittent fasting is for your digestive system. Oh yeah, you give my digestive system such a break. But no one really talks about, you know, people are still consuming teas and waters and juices and all these things, and they're never giving their kidneys and their bladder a break.
Right.
And when you finally give your kidneys and bladder a complete 100% rest, I mean, that's a really good time for them to
Absolutely.
heal. And if I usually suggest, if you don't even want to do the 24-hour right away, to do the intermittent dry fasting, or just, starting with 12 hours, which a lot of people do.
Work your way up.
Already, yeah.
This is the thing. There's no set, if I do 23 today and I should have done 24, I'm in trouble.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
The body's thankful for whatever positives you can input into it.
Right. And you might dry fast a couple of times, or for a few days, or once a week, however you're doing it, and not get filtration right away. That's okay. Because you told me to dry fast, and I did, and I'm not seeing any filtration. Okay, we'll just continue with it. Maybe bump it up 13 hours every day, or 14 hours every day, or do your once a week thing. And they almost always call back. And I saw some, and that's why I want to get into another question. Is lots of people will call, and this happened to me too. So people call and say, I filtered for a day, or I filtered for a full week, and then I stopped, and I don't know what I was doing, and I can't figure out how to get it back. And that's just the cycles that our body goes through, right? I mean,
absolutely. We have cabins, and my family does, in Colorado, and we used to have to go back. It's way off back the road in the mountains, and we would get our water. Now they've since said don't drink the creek water, but we would have to go in, and especially if it was in the wintertime, we would have to go and we would have to break up the ice so that the flow was there and we could get our water. When you are first starting out, some of your lymphatic systems, they're not just slowed down. Some of those have actually, in the little capillaries that branch off, some of those have actually stagnated to the point that they're not moving.
Yeah.
And as you start breaking and chipping away at that little by little by little, you start opening that back up until that flow can then happen. But that can take some time, especially if it's calcified or hardened.
Mm-hmm. So just know that it can come and go, and just got to stick with it.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and then obviously the herbs for the kidneys.
Yep.
So I think that's some pretty good ideas on how to get. So that leads right into our next one, which is renal failure. And I just really wanted to put this on here because I think we all do, but I had never worked with, or not worked with, I'd never talked to so many people with renal failure and going into dialysis and all these different things, or kidney failure basically. And so if we could just kind of touch on that and kind of how to, navigate through the paths, especially if someone is getting close to going into dialysis or already is, how they can navigate obviously they have to get their kidneys filtering, but how much work can they do to their kidneys? Do they have to worry about overdoing it since their kidneys are at risk, basically?
The first question that I have for anybody that says they're on dialysis is, are you still urinating on your own?
Okay.
That's going to be a big key. If they're not, that's my first goal, is to get them urinating on their own. If they are, then it's going to be to try and talk them into holding off on dialysis as long as possible. We're used to the minute there's an issue, boom, dialysis, boom, this, take this drug, take this, do this. And so if you're still urinating, let's do some natural stuff to keep you urinating and increase that kidney filtration and get those kidneys functioning better. Mm-hmm. The longer a person is on dialysis, the longer it's going to take. It's kind of like diabetes. I'm a diabetic. I've been one for 41 years. I've been on insulin for 41 years. And the longer you're on that, insulin is a hormone. The longer I'm on a hormone, the more my pancreas says, I don't need to do this.
Right.
You're doing it. What do I need to do? Mm-hmm. And so staving off that dialysis as long as possible. Or even if that means at first going from 3 sessions to 2 a week and then trying to get down to 1 and eventually backing off completely. Mm-hmm. That's your goal anyway. Your goal is to make sure that body can handle the urination process. And as long as you're peeing, there's some stuff going on there. Mm-hmm. Just trying to manage it as much as possible.
Okay. Having
a lot of faith.
Yeah, because that's just a nasty experience.
This is also going into the emotions because kidneys are fear. Mm. Kidneys and adrenals, fear and anxiety.
That's so funny. because the two kind of people are just, you know, different people that I've worked with that are on full dialysis. You could tell that there was so much fear with coming off of that, or fear with anything, fear with changing their
Yeah.
diet. And I mean, they were just, you know, talking about even just the environment in the dialysis center
Mm-hmm.
was just awful, and the way that they were treated and different things. And I'm sure it's not the same everywhere, but a couple different people I spoke with, it was like that. And, you know, basically yelling at them, wanting them to eat these protein packs and these protein drinks and different things. And it's like, from what we know how detrimental proteins are to the kidneys to begin with. I've heard Dr. Morse say it a lot, and people, but actually hearing these people talk about what the doctors and things want them to do and are pushing on them, I'm just like, man, that would be a rough place to be in. And
well, when someone first is noticed by a doctor to have a lowering of the kidney function, and they start into the diagnosis of you're in stage 1, you're now in stage 2, the very first thing they do is they put you on a restricted protein intake diet. They even recognize what proteins do to the kidneys. Not amino acids, proteins.
Right.
But the minute they go on dialysis,
Yeah. What?
now we've switched it. That switch is flipped the minute you come out of that surgery. Now you have to eat high protein. Well, wait a minute. That's what destroyed the kidneys in the first place,
Yeah.
or a big part of it. And so we just haven't made the connections yet. It's just like we've been talking years about the interstitial fluid, and they just found the interstitium
Right.
and are calling it a gland now, or an organ.
Yeah.
And so it's just, but you know, the sad thing about that is now they're saying that they think that it is what moves cancer around in the body. It's not. It's trying to eliminate it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we don't know how to connect dots in our world today. We don't.
Yeah. We've lost the ability for critical thinking a lot of times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's two types of dialysis. There's the peritoneal dialysis, and then there is the hemodialysis. The hemo actually takes your blood out of your body, takes it through a machine that acts as a synthetic kidney,
Kidney, yeah.
and puts it back in. The peritoneal dialysis actually uses your stomach lining as a filter.
Really?
And
How
so,
does it do that?
but I don't even know the whole process of that. But I do know this. In both cases, the dialysis is trying to remove excess water and waste. But it also removes excess nutrition. Whereas your regular kidneys would not.
It would recirculate. It would.
And so what's happening is, in the end, more people end up dying from starvation than they actually do the actual dialysis. I mean, they're becoming more. If you do studies on renal failure and malabsorption, or dialysis and malabsorption,
Yeah, people are starving.
yeah, it's unreal.
Yeah. Okay. So we're done with that one. Now, one of your specialties probably, blood sugar issues. So, I mean, just tell us about blood sugar. You know what. You know, basically what the different blood sugar conditions, the hyperglycemia, hypo, diabetes, type 1, type 2, what do these different conditions basically mean? Maybe what do they have in common? How do they differ? And
So, when you're thinking of hyper and hypo, okay, hyper, hypo, low, okay? So hypoglycemic is low sugar. Hyperglycemic is high sugar, okay? Now you can be both. I don't mean you can be both at the same time, although you can, because you can be a diabetic and your sugars drop low and you're having a hypoglycemic incident. But when you look at this, how do I want to say this? Your hyper, that's your type 1 diabetes or type 2 diabetes, okay? The hypo, when you're low, your sugars are too low. When you're a type 1 diabetic, that you have already engaged the hypothalamus, the pituitary. There's issues with the adrenals, the kidneys, the pancreas, and the liver. There just is. Pancreas is the beta cells. Liver, you're overproducing on the sugars. A lot of people think that you can only get high sugars from what you eat. That's not true at all. The minute you are stressed and produce cortisol, your liver, to provide the energy for that, your liver's converting, it's glycogen I think it is. One's in the pancreas and one is, but it's converting it into sugar, and your sugars can spike. And then that means the pancreas has to release more insulin. Well, in a diabetic where the insulin isn't being released as much, your liver can cause high sugars just as much, if not more, than a diet. And especially people go on these fruitarian diets all the time, and then they're seeing these spikes. And it's, number one, it's because you're pulling a lot of that stored sugar that shouldn't have been there in the first place from all the junk that you ate in the past. You're pulling that into the bloodstream, and you're pulling that in to be flushed out.
So that's when we talk about carb loading, or
sugar loading.
Sugar loading. That's what's going on.
Yeah. Your body can store sugar in the liver and in fat and in muscles.
Okay.
And so when you start on a detox, what does the body do? It starts to flush.
Right.
And you start flushing out sugars, and all of a sudden, crap, I knew it. This fruit's taking my sugar up.
Yeah.
And so you test, and you're at 350 calories, and you didn't realize that that's because you were flushing. And so you take enough insulin to cover that 350, but you were flushing, so it was almost a false high, and you would have normally dropped, maybe not down to normal, but back down a lot. So now you have a hypoglycemic where you go too low, and then you have to eat all this junk. Fruit barely triggers that to bringing it up. I don't know how many times I've had a low reaction, and fruit, I have to eat fruit after fruit after fruit after fruit to bring it up. So that ought to tell people something.
Well, yeah. So what is your suggestion on people that are, how long do they, I think you mentioned waiting longer before you test after you eat, and just understanding that, okay, I'm just starting this detox. Like, is that a 2-week period or month period?
It can be different for each person.
Okay.
For me, it took about 6 weeks until I started seeing myself level out a little bit. Some people, 3 days. I mean, that's why we tell diabetics you have to be very careful and test your sugars on this one, so that you get that part figured out. But if I were to, let's say, wake up in the morning and be 187, I'm not gonna do much with my sugars at that point. I'm gonna wait till 2 hours after, and if it's still high, then I'll take a shot. If it started to come down a little bit, I'll wait 1 more hour to see where it kind of settled, and then I'll take a shot according to that, so that I'm not taking too much and bringing myself. When you go into a hypoglycemic incident where the sugar is too low, remember what the brain feeds on mostly is glucose. And so in essence, it starts feeding upon itself, and that's why you get foggy thinking and you can't think when you've got a hypoglycemic incident going on.
Right.
Your adrenals kick in. That's where you get the numbness around the mouth. That's where you get the shaking feeling and the hunger. Your body's trying to give you all kinds of signs that I've got to have sugar, I've got to have glucose. That you can get really hungry, really tired, really shaky. These are all signs that the body is going into the autonomic system and different things like that is trying to give you signals, I'm too low. Another thing, people on synthetic insulin are finding that they are getting more and more insensitive to those signs. And that's a sad thing too. There are a lot of people with type 1 diabetes that don't wake up in the morning because they didn't wake up with those symptoms. The symptoms didn't wake them up.
Really? Specifically because of the synthetic nature of the...
I'm not going to say that, but a lot of research points to that.
Okay. All right.
I'm sure that there are other factors, but that is, I would imagine, a primary one.
So, and you mentioned lots of different glands and organs that are involved I mean, it's not a
Right.
one-shot thing, but maybe a little differentiation between the type 2 and the type 1.
Type 2, that is your adrenals, which can still affect the kidneys. And you're still being affected in a lot of times the hypothalamus and the pituitary, but that doesn't really have a whole lot to do with the beta cells, the islets. They're still producing. It's just that you're not as receptive to that.
Okay.
If you look at a cell, the cell wall looks smooth unless you get really deep, and then you see all these little insulin receptors all around that cell. And in order for, if I'm eating mashed potatoes or a steak or breads, in order for the nutrients to enter that, there has to be an insulin cell at each one of those receptors to allow that in. If I'm eating fruit, that is not necessarily. It enters that cell by diffusion. It doesn't have to go through that receptor. It can go through the cell wall.
Okay. Is that specifically the fructose? Or so
Fructose.
the fact that the glucose will still need some...
We're looking into that.
Yeah, okay.
You would think they're both very simple sugars.
Right. Yeah.
So you would think that might be the case. So we're actually looking into that.
Awesome. Okay. And I was going to ask you something about the type 1.
But I will
can't remember.
say that when I eat vegetables, I see a spike in my sugar even more so sometimes than I do with some of the fruits.
Right. Yeah, and the fruit, well, one thing that I think maybe a lot of people don't know is there's a difference between like a glycemic index and a glycemic load.
Absolutely.
So I mean, some fruits can be kind of high on a glycemic index, but their glycemic load is
very low.
very low, yeah.
So if you are a type 1 or type 2 diabetic and you're worried about the fruits, but you know that this is the way to go, look up the glycemic load, not the index, the load.
Yeah. And that's
Thank
the
you
actual...
for pointing that out. That's a very big key. It's like blueberries. Blueberries are very low on the glycemic load. And so they don't tend to spike the insulin as much, or the sugars as much, even with the flushing.
Yeah, I was looking at some different fruit that has a high glycemic index, and I think like maybe bananas and some of the more connects, but even at those you look on the glycemic load and it's well below like the low range,
Right.
Okay, do you want to talk a little bit about insulin and the different types? So you would suggest people maybe doing a different kind of insulin, or?
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about strictly the United States right here.
Okay.
Because I don't know the laws in Canada or the UK or any of those places. But in the 1980s, prior to the 1980s, we had pork insulin and beef insulin. We had a few people that had allergic reactions to that. Now, I can guarantee that if you go back and look at their immune system, their lymphatic system, that they were very, very backed up, and that's one of the reasons. Because if you take in anything, the more your lymphatic gets backed up, the more allergic, quote unquote, you're going to become to things. You're going to have an immune response when you eat something. So by taking the pork or the beef insulin, they had an immune response. Well, our government took that and said, let's make human. Now, there's a big difference. If you look at the structure of an insulin chain, it's kind of like in a little corkscrew type thing. At the very beginning, you've got chain A, and then you've got a C peptide, and then you've got B. The C peptide is the protein structure that keeps the formation, okay? And it is very important. Well, we can never do anything like God did. And when they created human insulin, they got the chain A, they got the chain B, but they can't replicate the C peptide.
Really?
And what happens is that's what holds that structure. And so it would be like building a house and a roof and putting that roof on without having those I-beams to keep that structure. It folds in on itself. And so when you get a C-peptide test, it tells you how much insulin you're producing.
So that's going to
But
be
it's the low C peptide that they are looking into as to being not necessarily the sugars, although you want to be in control, but it's the C peptide or the low C peptide that they're looking at, that kidney disease, heart failure, blindness, it's some of these things that are causing the actual quote unquote disease.
Wow.
So in my book, I am looking at trying to find beef or pork insulin that I can import into the United States and take and see if that makes a difference while I'm still on insulin.
Right.
Because
Wow.
one day
Yeah.
I will not be.
Yeah, because you're really low right now.
I've went from about 90 units. I was down to 17, 16, and then with a couple of things that happened this last year, went back up to 40, and now I'm back down to about 27, 25, 27, somewhere around in there.
Won't be long.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Awesome.
So, but again, it's just one more thing. We exchanged greed for health.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we can't replicate this as well as the animal insulin, but we're going to outlaw the animal insulin and put you on the synthetic human
Yeah.
insulin.
Yeah. Okay. What about, like, and I know you don't want to probably give specific numbers and things, because everything can vary, but like, what about people that are testing and want to know like what they should be looking for? Like any specific numbers or like ranges maybe, or?
I'm going to go back to the range that it was at. Right now they say 70 to 100. I like the range of 70 to 120 more. It's more balanced, number one. You don't have as short of a range where you're getting that feeling of hypoglycemia, of the nervousness, the shakiness, the numbness, the blurry vision, the foggy thinking, those kind of things. When I'm working with a diabetic, I don't worry about anything that's under roughly 170, at least to start. If you're testing it over 200, yeah, give yourself a little bit of coverage. But if you're around that 160 to 170 range and you're just questioning and you don't know what that basal is and you don't want to have a hypoglycemic incident, hold off a little bit and see what the sugars test at in about an hour to an hour and a half. You can always cover then.
Right.
It's better to be a little higher and take coverage for that if you need to than put yourself into a hypoglycemic state.
Okay. Awesome. So that, or no, you wanted me to remind you about limiting exercise when it comes
Yes. There again, heavy weightlifting and things like that, for whatever reason, on the weights, I'm not quite sure there. Maybe it is the movement of the muscles and stuff like that. But if your sugars are over 250, don't go to exercise thinking you'll bring it down, because you'll only take it up. And so just be aware of that. Your body is going to flush. And that includes sugars.
to. All right. Another one done.
Now we come to a tough one.
Yeah, well, yeah, the tough one. Let's just real quick before that. Stress is a big part of that too, right? Because the adrenals are so involved.
Absolutely. Stress is huge. In fact, to be honest with you, stress is very detrimental to the detoxing phase in general.
In general, yeah.
And stress is very oxidative. It's very acidic forming. Even just mental stress. Physical stress, you name it, any type of stress, even spiritual stress, you know. I won't even go into that, but spiritual stress can be a big one as well. Eliminate, eliminate, eliminate. That's what we teach during detoxification. You've got to eliminate your stools. You've got to get the kidneys eliminating. You've got to get the skin sweating. It's all about elimination, and that includes stress. You have to lower that. If you don't figure out a way to lower that, I don't want to say you're pedaling without a chain, but to be honest with you, you kind of are.
Yeah, absolutely. And not to go back too far, but just back to diet real quick. It's like people that are asking about every single fruit and how many ounces of grape juice and what exact pounds should I weigh?
Exactly.
So many minute details that people are stressing about, and I get it because they want to be perfect, or they don't want to waste their time, and
Right.
they need to heal. But I always tell them, I say, you got to understand that I can just hear the stress in their voices, and that is very counterproductive to what they're trying to accomplish. It'd be better to just let some things go and to just go forward. You can always
Right.
course correct and do the best you can, because when you're stressing and worried and all this stuff, you're bringing everything down to, very, very counterproductive. So
Yeah, and this is the other thing. When it comes to the diet that we talk about, eat it raw. Eat as high fruits as you can eat it. Well, what kind should I eat? Grab an apple for lunch. Grab 8, 9 mangoes for dinner.
yeah,
To not stress it is more important than eating it wrong.
yeah.
And what I mean by, should I juice it this time or should I eat it whole? That's neither here nor there. It is just eat it.
Yeah.
When it comes to the herbs, is it this much in the dropper? Is it this much in the dropper? Is it this much in the dropper? And is it 2 times a day? Is it 3 times a day? Is it what? You know what? There are days when I get in my 3 times, and there are days when I only get in 1. I'll make up for it. I'll do it 3 times tomorrow. There's days when I need to do a 4th today.
Yeah.
They didn't tell me to, but I need to do a 4th today. I feel some stuff, The thing is to not stretch it. It's not that you can't fine tune this enough to make it so perfect that it's going to just do absolutely everything for you today. Your body is a process. Detoxification is a process, and you learn as you go. You're going to learn during a grape fast that, you know what, I did 39 grapes this time and I'm doing great. Next time I'm going to do 40. Day 20 comes of that 40 day, and your body's just telling you, everything within you is saying, I need to stop. You need to listen to that,
Yeah.
no matter what you set for yourself, and don't let guilt be an issue.
Yeah.
You have to learn to listen to your body.
Yeah.
You have to learn to listen to intuition. Now, if that is telling you to go grab a donut and eat it, that's not your body and it's not intuition.
That's the parasite down
Yeah.
there. Yeah, and we'll talk more about like the guilt and things and stuff on that last one. But okay, so now for a big one. I feel like it's just been inundated with these questions. So eliminating viruses. So all viruses, HIV, Hep C, Hep B, HSV, all these different things. And specifically HSV maybe a little bit, just because I've been getting a lot of those calls, and different
we've
things.
been very swamped.
So I think there's just a lot of confusion about what a virus is, and I think a lot of it is manipulated information that has been kind of to go along with the whole just contagion theory, just a lot of these different things. But how would you explain, what a virus is, and are they all different, or if we detox them all the same way? And
First of all, just like you have different types of bacteria, you can have different types of viruses. But it's important to remember that you go back to a virus. Any virus is a microorganism, meaning it's a tiny, tiny, tiny little organism. And it cannot survive outside of a host. It's got to have a host, whether that's bacteria, whether that's our cells, whatever it may be, parasite. It needs a host to replicate itself. If it doesn't have that available, it dies. So when you're looking at viruses and things like that within the body, number one, the only reason that it found a host was because the host was in an environment that is stagnant and couldn't fight that off.
Right.
That's the only reason it landed. Otherwise, our bodies would have
dealt with.
it would have been dealt with and flushed out. So the first thing that you have to go after in any situation with a virus is the immune system. You just have to. You've got to get that lymphatic system moving. You've got to get it cleaned so that it can recognize what should be there and what shouldn't.
Yep.
You just have to. So yes, are all viruses different? Yes, they are, but in essence, at their root, they are the same. They're feeders. They have to have a host.
Okay. So specifically for HSV, any thoughts on like the testing and the complete removal of the virus versus removing the antibodies versus just not having outbreaks or not being able to be transmittable? Just a lot of questions, about that.
Right. The one that I get the most is, can you reverse it? And can you get rid of antibodies?
Yep.
So I want to talk about those two first.
Okay.
The first one being, can you reverse it? Absolutely. You can. We've had people that have HPV, HSV, HIV. I know I haven't personally worked with an HIV person, but I know Robert has. And we've seen that happen. To where they test negative. You can test negative for the infection, but still have the antibody. So we're talking two different things here.
Right.
Okay? So they can test, you can get to the point where you test negative for an infection, but you still have the antibody. But you can even, if you dig deep enough, you can even get to the point where you've eradicated the antibodies. And we've had some people do that as well. That takes time, and that takes digging,
Yeah.
and that takes work.
A lot of discipline.
A lot of discipline. When it comes to the different testings, there are different ones. There's different ones that you can test. You can do a culture test, you can do a blood test, and different things. But remember, the virus doesn't live in the blood. So testing the blood isn't always as effective. There are certain tests that you can do, but you need to be in and have active symptoms to be able to test it. So if you don't have active symptoms, they're not as effective.
Okay.
So it's the different tests. If I were talking to somebody who is really wanting to establish once and for all if they have this or not, and then be able to do a test later on to compare, I would do what's called a Western blot. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. You can look that up on your own, but it's called a Western blot. So that's what I would do. I would do, if you're not going to do the Western blot, I think it's I, little g, big G. And that tests for antibodies as well.
Okay. I, little g, big G.
That one will actually tell not just if you're infected now, but if you've encountered it in the past or recently.
Oh,
So
wow.
you can tell on that as well.
Okay. All right. Yeah, and so when we're talking about time frames, obviously it's what you're trying to accomplish. It's fairly easy or I don't know, easier to remove the outbreaks. You clean up the system and you're not going to be...
Right. The more outbreaks you have, this is the problem that you run into. I'm going to use, because we get more calls for HSV than anything, I'm going to speak to HSV. The more outbreaks that you have, the more congested you are lymphatically. That's bottom line. The less outbreaks you have, the more you are cleaning up the immune system, and the less the virus wants to activate, because you're going to be able to find it if it's activated. Or the immune system will be easier to find it if it's activated. So you're going to have less of those outbreaks, less of those triggers. There are triggers with HSV. Some of the main ones are, biggest one is stress. Again, that's the biggest one. Being in the sun too much, eating wrong foods, those can be triggers as well that can trigger an outbreak. The thing about HSV, and I was doing some research because I knew we were going to be talking about this today. The one statistic I found, and I do not know how accurate it is or how true, is that 80% of those with HSV do not know they have it. Because many are asymptomatic. Many never have an outbreak. And so what do you do in those cases? Well, we're going to get into probably some morality issues, but being a doctor and doing what we do, we're going to, I don't want to say lay that morality aside, but we just need to talk frank. Okay? If you are going from one partner to another, even if you don't even think that there's the possibility of a chance, I would get tested. So that you know, because that person may not have known. And they may not even have known to tell you. Yeah. So if you're going from one partner to another, get tested. If you feel a little cold sore and you've never had a cold sore before, get tested. You may not have picked that up from somebody kissing you. That can be passed from fork to fork to fork, glass to glass, drinking after somebody. You and I are buds, we're out having a beer, you order a beer, I don't really want another whole beer, but I'm going to borrow a little bit of yours. Right there. Yeah. You know, that HSV1, the oral, although they can both be in both places, but the majority of that one, that's your cold sores. And that's, I mean, they say, what was the statistic I read last night? That
I mean, pretty much, yeah.
85% of anyone over the age of 7, I think it was, has HSV1.
Yeah, I know it's really high.
Yeah. I think that's what it was. I don't remember. I should have printed that off, but it just floored me. People. Yeah, it just floored me. And the thing is, they were saying you could have gotten it from Grandma. You know, she could have been testing your food, didn't realize she had it. She could have gotten it from, you know, blowing up a balloon at a party that you blew up. You know.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
But that's that. HSV2. That's a little bit more. That is through sexual transmission on that one. Sexual contact. And that's why a lot of times condoms are not even enough, because it can be the skin around that comes into contact, and not just the sexual organs on that one. And so you just, there again, you need to be smart about that. And if you're switching partners, obviously the best thing to do there, in our world, the word abstinence is a laughable thing, but that's your best way to protect yourself against that. And if you're not going to do it that way, there are some other precautions that you can take, obviously.
Okay. So what would be, okay, someone just got tested and they tested positive for HSV2. So what would be a general, obviously you should call in and probably get an appointment, because they look at a lot more, you know, details into your history and everything. But just to get started, what would somebody could do? Maybe a plan of action, like diet.
So I came up with protocol. An acronym.
Okay. Love acronyms.
I call it SNIDE.
SNIDE. With an E?
Yes.
Okay.
So SNIDE. This is what I would work on. S stands for specifics. You've got to focus on your body. Okay? Understand, I mean, if you're having lesions and pain and things like that, that's where you're gonna, let's get over this painful thing, and then we'll start focusing on how to dig deep to try and keep it from returning.
So specific, like focusing on the acute symptoms.
Exactly. Okay. The acute symptoms. SN. N stands for nutrition. I have truly not read or heard or worked with anyone that has reversed this outside of a raw diet. I just haven't. So I'm just going to be flat out honest with you on that one. I'm not saying there's not somebody out there, some obscure person that found something that did it. But from the cases that I read and the people I've worked with and the stats we've seen, it has been a raw diet. Nutrition, nutrition, nutrition. You have to flood your body with healthy foods. And that is not pizza, donuts, and pop. The one girl, she was doing mostly raw, but just doing a few little things on the side, and she wasn't getting it. She wasn't beating it. And she decided, okay, I'm going to give this 6 months all raw, and she ended up testing negative after that.
Wow.
So, I mean, it can be done. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And do I believe that you can reverse the antibodies? I do believe that. Because we've seen some cases here at work.
Awesome.
So I do believe
So
that.
specifics and then nutrition.
Nutrition.
Diet. Yeah, raw diet.
Next, SNIDE. That's the immune system. You have to go after that immune system. You've got to build, build, build. What builds your immune system? Nobody's told you pizza builds your immune system. Nobody says beef has built your immune system. But they always talk about fruits and vegetables for building the immune system. Vitamin C's and things like that to build the immune system.
So is building the immune system the same thing as cleaning the lymph system?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Right.
So that would be the elimination aspect. That's D. D is next. Detox. Detox, detox, detox. It's clean the body, especially all of the eliminative organs. And when we talk about the eliminative organs, I'm going to talk about 5 primary ones. And I call it the BULLS, B-U-L-L-S. Bowels, absolute must. Viruses like to hide behind heavy metals. And so you're going to want to flush a lot of these heavy metals. And the way to pull those out is a lot of times the colon, from the colon. So definitely there. Urinary, for the U for bowls. I love acronyms, if you can tell this. That's your adrenals and your kidneys. You have to increase your adrenals, and you have to get kidney filtration because you're going to be eliminating a lot of stuff. Lymphatic is an absolute must. You've got to have that moving, and you've got to get that cleaned out. Lungs, being able to breathe and get that stuff out. And last but not least, skin. Just getting rid of and sweating out toxins and taking baths and Epsom salts, dry brushing, anything that you can do to eliminate toxins and get lymph moving is going to be key on that. So detox, detox, detox. The next one is elimination. We kind of talked about that already, but getting rid of all blockages. This is going into spiritual and emotional. When someone gets the diagnosis of HSV, you're talking guilt, shame, fear, hopelessness, isolation. You feel alone. I'm never going to be able to have a relationship again type of thing. I hear this all the time. I go through more tissues when people are talking about that than I do even cancer. Because with cancer, we're all about helping. With HSV, it's a subject that we just don't talk about too much. And so you feel isolated. And understand that surrounding yourself with support system. Now, this goes for anything during detox, but support system is huge on that one. Things that I like to, blockages, we want to go back to that for a second. That includes emotional, traumatic blockages, because those can block things just as much as an actual toxin or poison or anything like that. You have a traumatic experience, you store that in this area, and pretty soon that lymph creates a blockage around that it can't get through. Yeah, exactly. So the emotional becomes the physical, and that can happen with spiritual things as well. Get as spiritually free from things as you can. Let things go. Absolutely. Let things go. Things I like to that I like to recommend to people that have this issue. Oh goodness, there's so many things. Essential oils are phenomenal. Outside, we've talked about detox, we've talked about raw, we're building the immune system. Now let's manage outbreaks. Couple of people that have come back and said, this has worked well, this hasn't worked so well, this has worked well. I'm going to name a couple of essential oils that are top. That they have, that keep coming back. This is what I keep hearing all the time. Melissa oil, number one.
Melissa oil.
It is very, very expensive. I think a little bottle like this is like $180 some. But remember, you're just using a drop or so of it. And if at the first moment that you feel, okay, transmissible. You were talking about that earlier. So you don't have to have just an open lesion or outbreaks to be transmissible. There are a few times throughout a year, some people have no symptoms whatsoever, but there is called shedding. And most people don't know when they're shedding. And so you have to be cautious of that as well, and figure out those times. There's always sometimes a little inkling. I think they've referred to it as like a tingling or a nerve pain, or I don't know the exact terminology that they use, but sometimes you can kind of get an idea that one is about to break out. And if that's the case, I have read article after article after article on how Melissa oil can actually stop it in its tracks. Another good one is oregano oil. Although I've had multiple reports that stings like a son of a gun, and so use a carrier oil with it.
And that's put like on the base of the...
With all oils, you would apply them to the lesions.
Oh, okay.
But you would also put that at either the base of the spine for the HSV2, or you would put it at the back of the neck right back here for HSV1. That's where they tend to hide the most, is back here and back here. And at the top of the spine and at the bottom of the spine. So remember, they attack the nerves, and the spinal column is loaded with those.
Yeah. And then obviously, you'd be getting a personalized protocol with a consult, or if you're just wanting to get into it, you could start on the deep tissue cleansing kit, and making sure that you're on the parasite formulas.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And the essential oils on top of that.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, juicing and going after that lymphatic system hard is basically it. And time.
Time, yeah.
The problem is, the reason you don't hear of too many people saying I reversed this is because
You don't stick to it.
discipline.
Yeah.
You go on, to be honest, you're probably looking at least a year, if not a little longer. And to be flat out, I know I don't have this anymore, you're probably looking at a little longer than that. And for the average American person to go on a raw diet for that long,
Yeah.
and
Be consistent.
not be sure if it's even going to work,
Yeah.
which it will, but
Right.
most don't know that.
Yeah. But just imagine all the other enormous, amazing benefits you'll get from being raw for a year,
Exactly.
despite the virus.
Now, I know we talk about, and Robert doesn't care for ozone therapy, but there are a lot for those who want to look into it. I'm not going to say whether I'm for it or against it, but for those who are interested in research, you could research ozone therapy, because I have heard, especially in the European countries, a ton of people getting rid of it, eradicating it with ozone therapy.
Okay.
But remember, ozone can be just as toxic this way if it's too much. You've got that window 0 to 14, and we fall in the 7. You don't want to swing yourself way up to, the high.
Yeah.
You want to be careful. Ozone can burn just as much as anything. So you really want to be careful with that. Like I said, I am not advocating for or against, because I haven't done a lot of research on it. I was just, what I have read so far in European countries, that they're using it quite effectively.
Okay. So you already touched on time frame, which was next, and we basically did the diet, or plan of action diet. We talked about the stress and the shame being huge.
I wanted to mention two things that I made notes on. Pectin in fruit draws out heavy metals. And like I said, the virus likes to hide behind heavy metals. Pulling heavy metals is important. Chlorella and cilantro are very, very good for that. We also have our chem metal detox.
And that's usually just to get people started. We say, all right, get on the
Yep.
14-week protocol, maybe double up on the Parasite M, or at least make sure you're on it, and the chem metal detox, the Mediterranean,
supporting the
oregano
liver.
oil.
Go after the adrenals and support those adrenals, because the less stress you have, the less outbreaks you're going to have.
Right.
Fresh squeezed grapefruit juice, herpes absolutely hates that. And pomegranate actually prevents HSV 1 and 2 from replicating. So I just wanted to mention those if anybody's interested.
Awesome. Good advice. Okay.
Last one.
Last one. We made it to the end almost. Okay. And I think this is probably what?
We may have to divide this video up into section 1 and 2.
I don't know how long we've been here. This is my first time in front of the camera, so I'm like, are we closed? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm 65 now.
Yeah.
How old are you?
I don't know how many clocks in here either.
Yeah. I think that's on purpose.
Yeah. Anyway, it's went by fast. I don't know how long the video's been, but so number 10. This is probably one of my favorite ones, or I think easily could be one of the most important. And that's just talking about like what mindset should we have, and what approach should we have when we go into detox, or we go into the journey of healing, or the journey to Wellville. So I don't know. When I listed this off here, I just kind of, the top row was kind of about the things that you want to have. You want to have motivation and goals, and using your willpower and discipline. So we can talk about that, the things that we want, and then maybe some of the things that hold a lot of us back from
yeah,
getting where we want to be.
Regardless of what you do it wholeheartely. Because if you're only in it halfway, you're only going to get half results, if that. If you never shoot for a target, you're never going to hit it. You're not going to have to worry about it. Give it your all as much as you can, and find a good support system around you. Understand emotions are going to cause you to crave food, and potentially derail you. Don't let guilt and shame tear you down. Do it. It's like Robert said. He was on, I forget, day 3 or 4 of a fast, and was craving Reese cups, was it? And just, and finally he gave into it. About made him sick, but he's never liked them since. And it's not what you do occasionally. It's what you do consistently.
Yeah.
If you are consistent with this, there's only a couple of things that I have seen hinder this protocol. Time. If somebody comes to us, and nobody knows when that time is. I'm sorry, you doctors out there, I'll speak specifically to you. You out there labeling people with 3 months and 6 months and things like that to live, shame on you. Shame on you. You have no right. You have no right to give that diagnosis, because every person is different. So you can't even fall back on experience to say, I've seen people with this die at 3 months at this stage. That's fine. But you don't know the tenacity. You don't know the willpower. You don't know the fight that somebody has within them if they're just given half of a belief or half of a little sign of hope, what they'll take and run with. And so to say that is just astronomically huge in being wrong. I had a friend of mine call and say he had a little this was years ago, say a friend of his had their 7-year-old boy was dying. And I tried saying, there's a few things you can do. Do this, do that, do that, the other thing. And they're like, no, they've only given him a week to live. Who cares? If that were my child, I would not stop doing anything until he'd taken his last breath, or at least the week after. So I'm just serious. There's nothing that would make me stop trying and just give up. I always go back to the story of David in Scripture, when him and Bathsheba had the affair, and she had the child, and the child got sick. David lay prostrate on the floor, and sackcloth and ashes, and begging God to spare that child's life. And once that child died, he got up, he washed himself, he went in, and he had a feast. And everybody around him was like, what are you doing? Why are you normal now where you weren't before? And he's like, before my son was gone, there was a chance that God would change his mind. But now that he's gone, there's nothing I can do about it.
Right.
until you take your last breath, there is always hope and there is always a chance. Always. I don't even care if that's prolonging your life a week, 2 months, 2 years. We're not given tomorrow. I could clean until I'm absolutely miraculously healthy and my hair's down my back in gorgeous waves and I'm 85 but I look 23, and I could walk out the door and be absolutely amazing and bam, here comes a bus. I'm just saying, we aren't guaranteed tomorrow.
Right.
Run with what you've got the tools to run with. Do what you can do.
Yeah.
Keep yourself motivated. If that's writing notes to yourself on the mirror, the refrigerator, if that's, hey mom, how are you today? Oh honey, I bet you're feeling sick. Oh, sorry mom, gotta go. Psst. Talk to you tomorrow when you're in a little better mood and can support me a little more. Whatever that is, don't do it in a mean way. I mean, don't just kick people out of your life and be mean about it. But if you need to back off of somebody who brings you down constantly during a moment of healing and stuff, then you need to do it.
Right.
So.
Yeah, it's important to surround yourself with people and information that is, encouraging and
Sorry,
motivation.
I kind of ran away with that one.
No, you were on a roll there. That was good. But yeah, we're just talking. Yeah, just keeping the motivation, and I think having goals, like you said, is good.
Yeah.
I think you have to have a desire, and lots of times to have a desire, you have to have hope.
Yep.
But if you have a desire and then you back that with belief,
Mm-hmm.
and then you implement it with action, those three things are really
Absolutely.
good to get you on the road. And then
Absolutely.
I think, I know that taking personal responsibility is huge.
If you're sitting there eating a apple pie and you're blaming your spouse for making it,
Yeah,
that's not going to work.
yeah,
Especially if you're the one doing the journey and they're not.
right. Yeah, we have to realize that everything where we're at right now is we're at for a reason, and we created that.
Yeah.
And it's not something that just happened to you and hopefully you'll get through it. It's like if you created it, you can, create something new. So I just think it's important to keep that mindset.
And love the people around you that may not be totally with you and on board with you right now.
That's a good point.
Because you're the testimony.
Right.
If my husband and I wouldn't have made it, and I'd have been like, you know what? You're not supporting me in this. We've no longer got the same goals, and I'm just gonna go do my thing. Where would he be right now? I don't want to take claim and responsibility for that, but look at what he's done. When we first started, it was you don't touch the meat and you don't touch the dairy. He was 310 pounds. But slowly, gradually, after seeing things that I have done, I may still be a diabetic, but that's one of the 15 things that I started out with. I had arthritis so bad that my fingers would lock, and I had to actually pry my fingers open to even hold a pen. And before I was even on this journey, I was getting cortisol shots, and then I found out how awful that was. And it's gone. I mean, things that were relatively bad that were accumulating are gone. Now, yes, I'm still dealing with a few things, but he's seen that.
Yeah.
And he has actually been changing. And he's lost, I was thinking it was 75. We were calculating the other day. He's lost 85 pounds. And yes, he still has issues, but doing better than he was way back when.
And he looks good. I met him the other
Yeah.
day. Yeah.
Oh, did you? Yep.
Yeah. So
So-
yeah, that's really important.
Remember, your journey is planting seeds wherever you go.
And another thing is, if you're ugly or mean to the people around you, not only is that, that's not helping you out at all either. There is, karma, or you reap what you sow, or whatever you want to call it. So, I think the most important thing is just surrounding yourself with like-minded people and encouraging people. And for those of you that don't have anybody like that around you, like I did, like when I started getting into raw foods and all this stuff, I was so excited about it, and I didn't even know there was other vegans in the entire city or surrounding cities of where I lived. And when I found a few, I realized most of them weren't, like clean eating, vegans, and no one really practiced a raw food diet.
Right.
So for me to stay on that path, I started to become friends with people that I've never met before, like Dr. Morse and Dan McDonald, and just so many different people on YouTube, and people that were well known and not well known. And I had got some good advice from people on YouTube. They said, hey, if you wanna stay raw, not that you have to be 100% raw, but if that's your goal, don't follow all these people that are making delicious looking cooked foods, whether it's meat or whether it's just vegan. Just get rid of those on your social media and stick to the people that are living the lifestyle and have the mindset and attitude that you want to have. It doesn't matter if you have physical people in your life, because it was over 2 years that I literally had none of those people physically around me that was eating that way and was so into the deep levels of detoxification. But I felt like I did, because there was these 3 or 4 videos that I knew I could watch every day. I could hang out with my buddies online and hear their stories.
Take 32.
Yeah, go. Okay, but yeah, mindset and approach. I think that's the biggest thing, right? And so I had some more stuff on there, not being prepared versus, overthinking. I think overthinking and
judging
perfectionism.
yourself too harshly, trying to get every little thing right. Perfectionism is stress on the body.
Yeah.
It really is.
I know that.
And so you've got to just be careful. Almost to a T, everyone that comes in my office, that they've got a groove in the inherent mental, that is perfectionism. And I can tell you, it's putting stress on that adrenal, constant friction on that adrenal, and that's like I said, that's counterproductive to what you're trying to do and accomplish.
Yeah, and then maybe without going too far into it, dealing with family and friends, obviously that can be a big issue. I would just say you got to realize that you're on this journey with yourself. You can't please everybody, and you're not going to.
Right. For the younger ones that are trying to do this, and mom and dad are looking over the shoulder, you've got to do this with love, because you need their support to do this. But still, do it. Don't judge. If somebody, if you went vegan and you've been vegan for 3 years, and you sit down to lunch with somebody who says, yeah, I'm vegan, and yet they're putting cheese on something, don't judge that. They may not understand what true vegan is.
Yeah.
Or you just can't judge where somebody else is in their journey. You worry about you. You worry about you, and that's all you can do.
Yep.
Take care of it.
Right.
Take care of you.
Just a couple more things. I think we talked about setting goals is important, but maybe setting time frames is not necessarily always advisable.
Yeah.
Because, it doesn't matter if it takes a month or a year. We're healing the whole body, we're increasing our energy, we're just, we're letting go of physical and emotional things. You just got to do the work until you get to where you want to be.
If you come to this process thinking I'm going to give it 3 months, and if I don't see any changes, you're probably not going to be too successful on it, because remember, most of us are coming with years of backed up stuff, whether that's spiritual, whether that's emotional, or whether that's physical. And to reverse 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years in 3 months, there's some things you can start clearing up in that time frame. To get to some of your deep issues, it's going to take you a little bit of time.
Yeah.
So, and setting, as far as time frames go, saying I'm going to do a grape fast, that's excellent. Saying I'm going to do a 108-day grape fast, hold on to that very, very loosely, and let your body speak to you on that. Be very careful. Be very careful on that.
Yep. So one more thing about mindset is, you don't want to have to be perfection. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to have all your ducks lined up in a row just to get started. But I think it is important or advisable to understand the basics and to understand the possibility of healing crises or cleansing reactions.
Yep.
Because otherwise you get into it without any preparation or any knowledge, and you get the cold or you get the headaches or the rashes, and they freak out and they stop everything.
Right. Exactly. And remember, a healing crisis can be literally anything. I could do a whole video that would probably go longer than this on just my healing crises alone and what I've put myself through and gone through and seen. really seriously. And I think Robert said this the other day, but I had a lady call in. She was literally being wheeled to the surgery room. Something told her to take her phone, and she had it with her, and so they stopped outside the surgery door. She was literally the next person that was supposed to go in, and I called, and we talked it through, the fact that she was going to have her gallbladder removed. Talked it through, the fact that this was probably a healing crisis and that she could maybe get through with it, and she hung up the phone. She looked at him. She said, I changed my mind. I can't even imagine the look on their face with that. Went home. She did 9 days of grapes. I think it was 8 days of apple juice. She was on fast food for 17 days. Felt absolutely amazing and is preparing this weekend to do a liver flush.
Yeah.
And
it's crazy, you know.
They're so thankful. So thankful. And so aches, pains, doctor, surgery, pills, prescriptions. Remember, the body knows what it needs to do, and you don't always need that stuff. I'm not saying there's not a place for emergency medical at all. That's not what I'm saying. And if you're going to be in an emergency or an accident or anything, you want good surgeons and doctors surrounding you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But.
So I think that's it. I mean, for the last thing that I want to say is just probably the most important thing that's helped me, especially if you're up in your mind a lot and overthinking things, is, and Dr. Morse said it as well, you have to have fun. Like if you can somehow turn all the suffering or all of the desires to heal and all the cleansing, and you can just have fun with it and make it a game or just have fun with it, man, it changes everything. When I finally stopped trying to be so perfect and started having a little bit more fun with things and just seeing how it went, so you have to have fun and you have to let it go. So just Yep,
let it go. Turn it into something. I remember my one son, he had a job when I think he was 16, and he worked in an office, and they wanted him to go in, and he had to wipe certain hard drives clean of something. I forget what it was. Instead of it just being where I walk into the office, I pull it out, I do whatever, and this and that, he actually would sneak around the office, and he pretended like he had to get in and back out before anybody realized he was there, and it was like some spy thing. He come home from work that week just on cloud 9, having a blast at work. Make it fun. Turn it into something that's fun, adventurous.
Trying crazy smoothies or new meals, or trying to get your family to eat some weird stuff, or because anything you're holding on to, if it's judgment on other people, or if it's judgment on yourself, or am I eating the right things, or am I ever going to get through this, if you can just let that go, I think that's one of the most important things, because that can be your holdup. You can be doing all the things perfectly, but if you're not letting go of emotional things and all that, it's going to be
more people get stuck because of the emotional and the spiritual issues. They go as far as they can, but they just can't break through that wall, and it's usually an emotional or a spiritual issue that is holding them back.
Right.
So.
Well, I mean, everybody's left the office. We stayed here way too late, but I want to say thank you for letting me be on the video, and
absolutely.
Yeah.
You have this young man to look forward to for anyone who is going to choose to work with me. We're got class coming up, so that transition may be after class. But that's going to happen. And just thank you for joining us. Like I said, this will probably be broken up into a couple of different segments, but your health is important, and don't let anybody pull you away from it.
Yeah, and you can do it for sure.
Yeah, including you. Don't let you pull you away from it. So thanks a lot for joining us, and have a wonderful weekend.
Oh, wow, I can't believe that went so long.